Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. Today we will see what if Naruto has a pet tiger. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The so-called emissary from Kumogakure chuckled heartily as he and his partner made off with their prizes taken right under the senile Hokage nose intact. The one Gaki's father had almost blown the whole thing and nearly juked his ass if his partner hadn't taken him out as quickly as he did. The pair was now safely out of Konoha and making for the Lightning Country border, and with the cover-up job they did it would be dawn before a SAR team was sent out to reclaim their property. "Rai, I think it is safe to slow down and set camp for the night before we cross the border tomorrow, especially if they alerted border patrol before we reach it," said the Cloud Nin to his partner, who nodded in agreement before they headed for a suitable clearing to stop for the night. "This spot will work, Kai. Good cover and clear line of sight in all directions," said Rai as he dropped his pack unceremoniously to the ground. "Good choice. Set camp while I check the cargo," said the Cloud Nin known as Kai coldly as he too tossed his bundle down with an unceremonious thump as he pulled back the covering of his cargo, revealing the purplish-black hair of the Hyuga heiress. Kai checked the genjutsu he had placed on her to keep her unconscious and her chakra suppressed. He then lifted one eyelid and smiled as he saw the usual lavender eyes of the Hyuga clan and the lack of the cage bird curse seal found on the Hyuga branch family members. He smiled broadly. The examination of her corpse would prove most insightful in reproducing the Byakugan for the village's own purposes. The only reason she was still alive now was because they wanted as fresh a body as possible for examination and had several candidates in line to potentially receive her eyes. He then moved to the second bundle, revealing the sleeping blonde-haired form of one Uzumaki Naruto. A Konoha orphan who for some strange reason instilled fear in even some of the most feared Konoha nen. It was for that reason that the duo had been instructed to capture the Gaki. He had been disturbed when Rai told him that the boy lived in an apartment alone and not in the orphanage, even more disturbed when he learned that the Hokage himself paid him a weekly stipend for food, cloths, and other normal odds and ends. But what got him the most was the resemblance to the revered and, if you were from Iwagakure, feared, yellow flash of Konoha, the esteemed fourth Hokage. If this brat turned out to be that bastard's illegitimate son or some other relative, then the information that could be gleaned from him would be more valuable than even the Hyuga girl's eyes, no matter how powerful they were. He let a satisfied smirk cross his face, seeing as the genjutsu was keeping their cargo asleep. Kai plopped himself down against a tree facing his partner. "The resemblance is uncanny, isn't it?" asked Rai, motioning to the boy. "If the kid really is somehow related to the yellow bastard of Konoha, then the pay for this mission just tripled, if only because of the potential information we could get from the brat," responded Kai greedily. "Once those knees back home get their hands on those two soon-to-be corpses, the money will just roll in and we can retire in style." The pair let out good hearty laughs at the thought, but they were soon drowned out by an angry and fierce roar that emanated killing intent so strong even a cage would wet her pants when faced with it. What was that, Kai? Kai looked to his partner. "Sounded like a tiger or something, but there are no tigers north of Konoha. Best check it out, but stay in sight of each other," said Kai, pulling out a kunai before heading out to investigate. Rai stayed behind momentarily before pulling out a couple of his shuriken and headed out in the opposite direction. The younger ninja had only gone a short ways when the sound of a snapping twig caught his attention. "Who's there?" he called out. "You already gave yourself away. Give up now and I'll be merciful." "As merciful as you will be to those two children you kidnapped," said a harsh growling. "If that is your definition of mercy, then no thanks. I'll take my chance at besting you. Obviously you aren't a shinobi, otherwise you wouldn't banter with me, giving me a sound to use to track your location," said Rai as he moved closer to the source of the voice. "Yes, I'm not a shinobi, but just because I'm not formally acknowledged as one doesn't mean I can't beat one. Contrary to belief, there are things out there more powerful than you, ninja," said the voice with a cold mirth. "And you are one of those things," said Rai with a confident smirk as he pounced a bramble thicket, tracking the source of the voice to that spot only to find it empty. He looked at the spot confused when he felt hot moist breath on the back of his neck when the cold growling voice whispered into his ear. "Yes, I am." And with that a clawed hand struck, ending Rai's short career as a Kiri nen. Kai returned to camp having found nothing and discovered that their precious cargo was now gone. At this point Kai heard a cold mirthless growling laugh, Poor little shinobi, lost your little victims. Who are you? Where's Rai? The elder ninja demanded. At that point there was a thump as a shuriken holster and Hite Ite with 3 heavy claw marks on it landed at his feet. Rai sends his regards from the next life and hopes to see you soon. Luckily I plan to grant his wish and will be sending you to meet him shortly, said the voice with cold venom. Bastard, what the hell are you? Demanded Kai as he gripped the Hite Ite and pulled out a kunai. Someone who doesn't tolerate kidnappers and child killers, even if they are shinobi, said the growling voice. Then with a blur of speed something darted from the trees above him and connected with a hard kick causing him to land on his back. Kai looked up and saw his attacker standing before him. His attacker had a mop of short brown hair and wore a blue sleeveless tunic with black pants and heavy black leather boots that had heavy black buckles on it. He had twin silver manacles on his wrists and a jade stone pendant cut in the shape of a tiger's claw. But instead of skin he was covered in coarse black on white striped fur, like a white Bengal tiger. His hands were clawed, and most fearsome of all were the pale yellow gold slitted cat's eyes that looked back at him. Each eye had a black tome mark on either side of the pupil like the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan. I don't know who you think you are, freak, but the only person going to meet the afterlife is you. And with that Kai leapt up and charged him, kunai drawn and ready to make an instant kill. But in another blur of movement he found himself slammed into a tree trunk, the beastman's hand pressed on his throat. Who am I, you ask? I am the servant of the Lunanara, cat goddess of the moon, wife of kindness, protector of the innocent, and bringer of justice. I am a watchword and you shinobi are dead. With that the watchword crushed the life out of the Kiri Nin. Lazarus Zenith was a peaceful man and hated killing but had long ago accepted the fact that for ideals like justice and goodness to thrive evil deeds must be done. It was with the gravest respect that the watchword buried the bodies of the 2 Kumo ninja. He then said a brief silent prayer that the 2 would find peace in the next life. With his duty done the watchword closed his eyes and focused his mind. His jade pendant soon cackled to life with energy that emanated outward from the charm across his body. Slowly the coarse black and white fur gave way to peach-colored flesh, nimble clawed hands became weather-worn and calloused and yellow gold cat's eyes became normal blue-gray. With a relived sigh Zenith opened his eyes and embraced his human form. With a smile he looked up at the almost full moon and gave a small bow of respect before looking up towards the tree tops. Taylor, Share, the coast is clear, you can bring your charges back, he called. Quicker than the eyes could see a pair of tigresses appeared before him. Perched on their backs still asleep were the forms of Hyuga Hinata and Uzumaki Naruto. The genjutsu still affects them, Zenith-sama. The Kimo Nins knew their art well to have the jutsu fueled by the victim's own chakra rather than their own, said the tiger known as Taylor who was carrying Hinata. Yes, the illusion holds, but I sense the effects slowly weaken on my charge. A great will is slowly unraveling the spell. This boy holds a great power within him, but it is primal and untapped and at the same time disturbingly familiar, said Share. I noted it when those shinobi crossed my path carrying those 2. It was the reason I trailed them for so long. Something with that much power could only be a tailed beast. The question though is which one, said Zenith to Share. The watchword quietly approached the sleeping boy and placed a hand on him and closed his eyes as he mingled their chakra. Immediately a wave of terrible power washed over him and forced him to break the connection. Fortunately Zenith had seen enough. So you weren't defeated, Kyubi. Fitting justice I say for all the damage you caused to be bound to one of the meager flesh bags you so hate. Justice and irony once again go hand in hand, remarked the watchword with cold mirth, realizing that beast that had caused so much destruction for so long was now in a position to be the greatest asset in the shinobi world. This boy is the vessel for the 9-tailed fox, remarked the 2 tigresses astonished. The boy must have a will of iron to be able to withstand the power of that fiend. I heard that the vessel of the one tail barely lasted 5 years before succumbing to its influence, said Taylor rather proudly. The boy has a strong will. I could sense that much, but the one who sealed the fox was a master of the sealing arts. The seal was done in such a way that the demon's chakra would leak out and add it to the boy's own but would keep the demon's influence contained. But if the boy draws on too much, then he could become overwhelmed by the beast's influence, and it was also designed to dissolve over time, and if the boy isn't yet ready to contain the 9 tails on his own, said Zenith thoughtfully, a hand still placed on the boy's head. The young man could definitely relate to the child's situation. Watchwares had the blessing of having the strength of both man and beast, but that blessing was only allowed so long as they wore their moon gem pendants. Should the pendant ever be removed or destroyed, then a watchware ran the risk of becoming an uninhibited beast of emotion and rage. Zenith then smiled to himself, realizing the decision his train of thought had already brought him to. He made a quick hand sign and called out, "Kai," before lightly tapping both the boy and the Hyuga girl, releasing the genjutsu placed on them. "Watch over them while I gather some firewood," said Zenith. The two tigresses gave him a look that said, "You have asked?" The watchware smiled, seeing the two females becoming rather attached to their human charges before heading out to collect wood. Uzumaki Naruto was known as a heavy sleeper. Every student in Naruto's class had heard the verbal berating the boy took from some of his teachers for his chronic tardiness. Most said he was becoming as bad as the copy nin Hitaki Kakashi. So it was a rather new sensation when Naruto woke up to find that it was still dark out, the boy realizing that he still had some time sleep yet snuggled back up with his furry pillow. "Hold up, since when do I have a furry pillow, and since when does my apartment have a skylight?" thought the hyperactive prankster. At that moment he realized that the warm mass he had been using as a pillow earlier was moving. Very slow, Naruto opened his eyes and stared straight into the blue eyes of the white tiger that he was currently sleeping against. "Up so soon, are we, cub?" said the tiger warmly. Unfortunately, instead of calming the already scared Naruto, it had the exact opposite effect. The young boy screamed, causing the young Hyuga heiress to wake up to be confronted by another tigress. The young child let out a soft eep before fainting dead away. Naruto quickly grabbed the girl's unconscious form and leapt away, unknowing, calling upon the demon fox's chakra to do so. "Stay back, you overstuffed furballs, you'll not have us as midnight snacks," yelled Naruto as he slipped into a rather sloppy taijutsu stance. "Kawaii, that is such a cute scene," the valiant hero defending the damsel in distress, Share in motherly-like voice. Taylor just rolled her eyes. "I hate to tell you this, cub, but you two would make too small a meal to even qualify as a midnight snack for them," said a voice from the trees above. In a blur, Zenith leapt down from his tree, a heavy bundle of wood strapped to his back that he quickly set down before turning towards the young boy. "Besides, these tigers are mine and don't eat humans, not unless I tell them to," he said with a roguish smile. "Yours," remarked the two tigress with what would be the human equivalent of a raised eyebrow. "You know what I mean," responded Zenith exasperatedly. "Anyway, I suppose it's my fault that you got scared. Should have made sure you stayed asleep while I went and got firewood," he said with a sigh. He made a move to check on Hinata, but Naruto moved to block him. "I don't know who you are, mister, or why you kidnapped us, but you take one more step and you'll have to deal with me," said Naruto seriously. "Forgive my rudeness, oh great master shinobi," said Zenith sarcastically with an over-exaggerated bow that covered the shuriken he had pulled out and quickly flung, pinning the back of Naruto's shirt to a tree. "But you should never make threats that you can't follow up on," he said with a hearty chuckle. He then moved to check on the fainted Hyuga heiress. Thankfully the ground was soft and nothing was broken. He would hate to have to deal with a pissed-off Lord Hyuga. He was a powerful watchword, but that didn't mean he wasn't susceptible to the effects of the gentle fist. Nodding approvingly, he reached into a small pouch on his belt and pulled out a small bottle that contained what appeared to be rock salt. He took a deep breath and opened the bottle and wafted it under the girl's nose. She sneezed before her shot open, looking nervously up at Zenith. "Now if you two have calmed down enough, perhaps we can get the proper introduction out of the way," he said with a smile. He made a quick gesture with his hand that recalled the shuriken that pinned Naruto to the tree, causing the young boy to fall to the ground. "Okay buddy, just who the hell are?" yelled the blonde as he stomped over next to Hinata. The girl quickly realized who was next to her, blushed deeply before she began fidgeting with her index fingers. Interesting," thought Zenith to himself. "I'm the guy who saved you two from becoming dead corpses that would become the subject of Kumo's medical examiners, had those cloud nin gotten away with you. As for my name, I am Lazarus Zenith, but most people just call me Zen." Zenith spent the next hour while getting a fire started, explaining himself to the pair of cubs as he had come to think of them. How he had sensed their chakra being suppressed, the malicious intent of the pair of Kumo nin, and how he had taken care of their would-be captors. Of course he had chosen to edit out the little fact of him being a watcher, which of course did not escape the watchful eyes of the shy young Hyuga, who of all people pointed out only trained ninja had sufficient chakra control needed to perform anything a basic jutsu, let alone an animal summoning. Zenith's features remained impassive, but inside he scattered about, trying to come up with a decent excuse. Even his "usually my parents were shinobi and trained me" excuse couldn't work, and unlike most other villages where he could claim to be an Uchiha, he couldn't use that bit because they were from the same village as the Uchihas. Fate, however, seemed to want to intervene. At that moment a strange scent hit his sensitive nose. It was human and had the scent of blood along with a common scent of trees that the two cubs shared. Guess those Kumo idiots were wrong about Konoha not being able to get a SAR team together before dawn. "Share, Taila!" he yelled, calling the two tigresses over to protect the cubs. He then quickly gathered his chakra and focused it around his eyes, called Eye of the Tiger. The two children gasped as the irises of Zenith's eyes seemed to collapse in on themselves before expanding outward again, now in their yellow gold cat's eye form with the two tomo marks on each side of the pupil. Zenith quickly scanned the treetops with his enhanced vision and quickly caught sight of the offender that had snuck up on them. It was an Anbu Black Ops ninja. That much he was sure of. The telltale animal mask and battle garb was enough of a giveaway. The question remained, though, just who was behind the mask. His target now inside Zenith focused on dispelling the minor jutsu that most Anbu cast on their mask to help shield their identities. Once he did get past it, Zenith could only smirk. The Lord Hyuga must have made quite a stink in order to get him sent out ahead of the main SAR team. "I don't know whether I should be frightened or honored that you of all shinobi were sent out for this mission, Hitaki Kakashi," he called out. "I see my reputation precedes me, as does yours, Lazarus Zenith, noted mercenary, vigilante, and overpain in the ass to villains the world over. I must say that I'm impressed. I thought that the watchwares had died out long ago," said Copy Nin as he dispelled his invisibility jutsu and leapt down to the clearing below. "I take it that you've read my bingo book entry," said Zenith as he dispersed his dojutsu. At least 7 bounties posted for your head, all large enough amounts to attract the greediest and most dangerous bounty hunters and ninja around. And yet here you stand alive and well, with 2 of Konoha's citizens in your midst," deadpanned the Anbu captain. "As you no doubt heard, I saved them from those Kumo bastards that wanted to take them back for examination and possibly transplant the Hyuga girl's eyes," said Zenith quietly as to not to scare the children. "As for those bounties, life isn't worth living if a certain amount of risk isn't involved," he said in a much louder voice. He then turned towards the 2 tigresses. "Take the cubs and have them try to get some sleep. We head out for Konoha at first light." "As you wish, Zenith-sama," said the pair. The 2 tigresses quickly turned toward their respective charges as nuzzled them over to the far side of the fire. Once he thought they were far enough out of earshot, Kakashi spoke up. "How were they when you found them?" he asked seriously. "Asleep. A strong sleeping and chakra suppression genjutsu was on them. The Kumo ninjas wanted them as intact as possible, and save for a minor bump or two, they are completely healthy," said Zenith. The Anbu captain nodded, looked over at the pair who had just snuggled down with the 2 tigresses coiled around them protectively. "Good to hear. Now care to tell me the real reason that you went out of your way to stop them? I always thought your kind stayed out of the affairs of shinobi? You care to tell me why that young boy has the Kyubi no Kitsune sealed within his body?" asked Zenith fiercely, his pendant flaring with energy as it kept the tiger in him contained. "Shouldn't be surprised that you sensed it within him. And why should I tell you the reason he has that beast locked within him?" asked Kakashi coldly. "Because I need answers. Why did the Yondaime seal that thing within his own son? And be careful of your answer. I heard what Suna did with Shukaku the One-Tailed and what happened to that vessel because of it. So tell me right now, did the 4th seal Kyubi with the intention of using his son as a weapon?" Zenith asked coldly. The air was silent for what seemed like eternity, then it happened with a speed that not even a watcher could track. Kakashi hit Zenith so forcefully that a lesser man would have been killed from the blow. "How dare you suggest such a thing? The Yondaime would never have done something like that. The beast attacked without warning. Arashi-sensei would never have risked anyone like," yelled the normally stoic ninja. Zenith groaned and rubbed his jaw. He then gave off a hoarse chuckle. "Your reaction was all the assurance I needed. said Zenith and got back up to his feet. Kakashi looked at the watch where incredulously, "You mean that whole outburst of yours was nothing more than a damn test? What do you expect, my dear shinobi? You lot are all trained to look underneath the underneath, and all that. I would figure one as capable as yourself would be used to something like this by now," said Zenith with a smirk as he dusted himself off before setting himself down against a large log near the fire. "And what would you have done if I had not passed your little test?" asked the Jonin curiously. "Would have knocked you out, taken the boy, and made sure you never saw us again," he said casually. "You mean you would have tried?" said Kakashi with a roguish smile. Zenith just smirked. "Yes, I would have tried. So with no need to do that, what do you plan to do now?" Zenith looked at the Jonin with a pensive smile. "The life the hunted is fun and certainly keeps one on their toes, but lately I've been getting tired of it. Constantly looking over my shoulder, keeping one eye on everyone around me and another on where I am. To be frank, I need a vacation. I thought maybe, taking up residence in one of the hidden villages. One whose cage won't mind having someone like me around. Maybe even taking on an apprentice train," he said looking over at the now sleeping Naruto. "Naruto, as your apprentice? Why?" Kakashi asked, now thoroughly confused. "Let's just say, I have more of an idea what the boy is going to be dealing with in the future than most would," said the Watcher cryptically. He then looked over at the Jonin smugly. "You know any villages like that by any chance?" The Anbu captain just shook his head and chuckled. "I may, but that is not up to me to decide. Your being allowed to stay in the village and train Naruto is up to the Hokage. That's the way things like this usually roll. Anyway, you can bunk down and get some sleep. I'll keep watch for a little while before I wake you to take over," said the Zenith. Kakashi nodded gratefully before heading over next to the two kids, their respective tigers watching him carefully as he pulled off his flak vest and bundled it up as pillow before resting his head on it. The two didn't take their eyes off him until he was asleep. Zenith smiled at the scene. It was going to be a whole new world come morning. He could only hope he was ready for it. Dawn came much too early for Naruto. He and his tigress guardian Share were having such good dreams that they refused to wake, but all good things must end and soon found themselves drenched as the Anbu from last night used a sweetened jutsu to get the pair up. "Try something like that again, pervert, and I will ensure that you never reproduce," said the angry tigress as she shook the water out of her fur. "I told you, Kakashi, like all felines they don't get along with water very well," said Zenith with a light chuckle as he proceeded to stamp out the fire from the night before. "It got them up, didn't it? Besides, I want to get going quickly. Knowing Hizashi, he probably had the SAR team out before dawn tracking us down," said Kakashi seriously. "I thought the head of the Hyuga clan was Hyuga Hiyashi?" remarked a now curious Zenith. "Hizashi is my uncle and Otuo-san's twin brother. He is head of the branch family and is the main family's chief bodyguard," said the young Hyuga girl nervously. "Ah, and you being kidnapped would be a big old stain on little bro's perfect record," remarked Zenith with a smirk. "No, the one thing I've learned about Hizashi the few times I've worked with him, is that he could care less about the divide between the main and branch houses. The only thing that matters to him is the protection of his clan and the village. The kidnap of his niece would affect him as much as someone kidnapping his own child. So you can understand why I want to meet up with them as quickly as possible," said Kakashi. "The father is most dangerous when tracking down his wayward young," said Zenith knowingly. "Exactly," said the Jonin gravely. After a quick breakfast of field rations provided by Kakashi and salted pork jerky provided Zenith, the group began the trek back towards Konoha with Zenith in the lead, followed by Naruto and Hinata riding on the backs of Share and Tailo respectively, with Kakashi bringing up the rear in case the bastards from Kumo had reinforcements waiting for them nearby. Zenith soon found himself walking next Naruto, the cub looking up at him curiously. "If you have a question, cub, ask, but be ready cause you might not like the answer," he said with a roguish smile. "Zenith-sama? Zenith or Zen cub? No one but those two call me Zenith-sama," he said with a smile motioning towards the two tigresses. "Anyo Zen, I wanted to know. That term the Anbu called you, watch something, what does that mean?" asked Naruto curiously. Zenith sighed and looked over, realizing that the Hyuga heir was now riding beside Naruto, the young cub obviously just as curious as her blonde comrade. Zenith gave a quick discreet look to the two tigresses hoping to get some advice. It is your story to tell, Zenith-sama. How you wish to tell it is up to you, was all Taylor had to say. Remember the advice of your Otuo-san. Better the truth now than trouble later, said Share sagely. Zenith nodded resignedly. There was no way around it this time. If he was going to help the boy, he needed to be honest as possible with him while he still could. He was well aware of the Hokage's law about the Kyuubi no Kitsune, and if he wasn't allowed to reveal to the cub what really happened then. No, I will make this work no matter what, he said to himself, ending that train of thought. He then turned toward the cubs again, both looking at him eagerly. Watch where that is what the Anbu called me. It is the term used to describe descendants of the Jinchuriki of the three beast lords. Spirits of great power that had over time become violent and destructive. Their reign of terror was comparable to the Kyuubi's path of destruction 5.5 years ago, and like the Kyuubi, no one knew why they attacked. For the longest time the three beast lords had been sagely guardians until one night they just attacked. How come no one ever heard about these beast lords? Asked Hinata shyly. Because the people they attacked faded from the world long ago. The people they attacked were in fact the predecessors to today's shinobi, for they also were warriors and protectors of a sort. They were called the followers of the moon, said Zenith sadly. Hinata's eyes went wide at this. Her mother, when the weather was bad, would tell Hinata stories about the followers of the moon. They were spiritual warriors that followed the tenets of the three legendary moon gods. Even today a few people in Konoha still prayed to them for luck and blessings. I'm glad to see that you recognize the name young Hyuga. It is good to know that not everything was lost from that time, said Zenith with a warm smile. Ka-san would tell me stories about the followers of the moon and of the moon gods. The stories about Lunanara were always my favorite, she said softly with an embarrassed blush. She was always my favorite too, mainly because I owe her my life more times than I can count, said Zenith as he fingered his pendant. Who were the other gods? Asked Naruto rudely, his interest now piqued. Zenith just smiled, so full of questions. That is a good thing, Naruto, never stop asking them. And to answer your question, the other gods were Vampirus the Wise, who's the god of the new moon, and Lunanara's husband, the warrior god Kindness. For years the the moon gods protected mankind, but their end came when the beast lords attacked, wiping out nearly every followers of the moon temple and village. The horror only stopped when the beast lords made their way to the Triad, the holiest of the gods of the moon temples, because it was that temple alone that was dedicated to all three of them and was said to be the birthplace of the religion. The Triad monastery on the night of the attack was filled with pilgrims because there was to be an eclipse that night, and eclipses were among the followers of the moon most sacred events. The loss of life was insurmountable, but the tide was turned when the masters arrived. Masters? Asked Naruto. They were like the Hokages for the followers of the moon. The most powerful follower of each god was chosen to lead their people, for amongst them they were the strongest, wisest, and most devout of the congregation. It was through their actions that the Lord Beasts were contained and sealed away, within the bodies of their newly born children, said Zenith sadly. Nani? Yelled Naruto, who was so shocked actually slid off Share's back. TTT, that's terrible, said Hinata with heartfelt sadness. Really, I always thought it was brave, said Zenith with mock confusion. How can you say that? They sealed monsters inside their own children, exclaimed Naruto. And if you were put in the same situation, what would you do? What would either of you do? Asked Kakashi, who had been listening from afar. What do you mean, Anbu-sama? Asked Hinata cautiously. Exactly what I said. If either of you found yourselves in a situation where, in order to stop something as powerful as, say, the Kyuubi, you had to seal the monster inside a newborn whose yet unused chakra pathways could handle the influx. Now would you use your own child or ask another parent to sacrifice their child when you wouldn't use your own? Asked the Anbu captain seriously. The two children looked at each other for a moment and then to Zenith, looking for an answer but didn't get one. I thought not. The title of a leader, be it master or Hokage, means nothing unless the person who holds it leads by example. If the masters weren't willing to use their own children, then how could they ask someone else to do so? By making that sacrifice they showed why they were chosen to lead and why others chose to follow them. Well put, Kakashi. I must say that I'm impressed, said Zenith with a knowing smirk. I had a good sensei, was all the stoic ninja said. I bet. Anyway, that was the start of how the Watchwares came to be. Over time the three Jinchuriki began to suffer under the influence of the monsters within. To keep that influence contained the master's crafted pendants cut from precious jewels and blessed by the respective gods to contain the beast and contain their vast powers. Many believed that was the end of it, but fate has a sense of ironic humor. Long after the attack and after the three Jinchuriki had grown up and come into their own, they married and started families of their own. One day the Jinchuriki of Lunanara, who contained the Wind Tiger Lord Beast, was traveling with his wife and son when they were ambushed by bandits. He fought hard and was able to buy his son time to escape before the bandits finally subdued him. What he didn't know was that his son didn't flee but hid nearby and watched as his father took the beating of the bandits. When the leader was about to make the final blow, it happened. The beast inside his son awoke and proceeded to lay waste to the bandits. When the dust had finally cleared, the Jinchuriki of the Wind Tiger looked on in shock at his son. His body had been covered in the same black and white fur he would grow when he entered his battle form. But the bloodlust and killing intent weren't that of a human. This was the thing his father and teachers had warned him could happen if his pendant was ever removed or damaged. The Jinchuriki quickly pulled his own pendant off himself and put it on his son, letting its effects quell the bestial instincts that flooded him, Zenith said with a sigh. "The first watchword?" asked Kakashi. Yes, after that the Jinchuriki of the Lightning Bat Lord Beast told of a similar incident with her son having manifested a bestial form similar to her transformation, and likewise for the Jinchuriki of the Stone Wolf Lord Beast, and they were merely the first of 6 born watchwares, said Zenith. Born watchwares? Asked Naruto curiously. Zenith looked at the young cub, surprised that he picked up on that. He was sure Kakashi would have been the one to ask. That is what a watchword is called when one or both parents are watchwares. It wasn't until later that we discovered the turning ability we developed and how some of the more colorful rumors about our kind came about, said Zenith with a chuckle. So you don't bite or scratch innocent people, turning them into ravenous monsters during the full moon? Asked the copy nin rhetorically. If the process were that simple, every person who ever fought a watchword would become one within a month. No, the process of turning or initiation is rather complex. Essentially, it requires a mixing of blood and chakra between the watchword and soon-to-be apprentice, and is only done under the most serious of circumstances or if the initiate fully understands what they're getting into. The process is taxing to both involved, but it can stave off immediate death, allowing the change within the initiate to heal what damage was done, said Zenith seriously. I see why then you try to stay out of shinobi affairs. A hidden village with a being who could suddenly give great power to even the greenest of genin would be a valuable asset. So why are you now helping Konoha? Asked Kakashi. Our reasons are our own and will remain so until Zenith-sama says otherwise, said Taylor with a growl. Zenith let off a hearty chuckle at that remark when a scent hit his nose, the distinct scent of burnt ozone that would follow the use of an electric jutsu. Share, Taylor, guard the cubs. Kakashi with me, he yelled, rushing forward, the Anbu captain close behind. The scent led them to a small clearing where they found a hastily concealed body. The pair quickly scanned the area, making sure it was clear before signaling for the tigresses to join them. Once they regrouped, Zenith and Kakashi quickly uncovered the body, one that Kakashi quickly recognized even without Hinata's gasp of "Nei-san." There before them, unconscious, was a heavily battered Hyuga Neji. Well, looks like we caught up the search and rescue team, said Kakashi. Yeah, the question though is who caught up with them? Asked Zenith with a sigh, realizing that the journey to Konoha would not be as easy as he hoped. Hinata watched with sadness as Zenith examined her cousin. She wasn't the most gifted when it came to reading people, but even her less than stellar abilities could see the concern in the knitted brows of the watchword. ZZ Zenith-sama, will Neji-kun be alright? Zenith looked the young Hyuga heir and sighed heavily. Well, the good news is that the burn he sustained is minor and not life-threatening, but the bad news is that his chakra is so suppressed by a genjutsu that if we don't get it off him soon he will die. So just release the jutsu like you did with us, exclaimed Naruto furiously. That's the problem, it won't release. The only reason it wouldn't release is damage or interference to the chakra coils. One of the few things I know that could do that is this. With that, Zenith slipped a hunting knife from his belt and slid it under the bandage around Neji's forehead and sliced it off, revealing the caged bird curse seal known to the Hyuga branch families. The seal in question at the moment was glowing with a sickly green light. What is that? Asked Naruto with curious concern. The caged bird seal of the Hyuga branch family. Every Hyuga branch family member when they reach a certain age has this burned onto their forehead. It is the safeguard that maintains the security of the clan's bloodline limit, the Byakugan. Should a branch family member die, then the seal activates, destroying the brain and sealing the information that could be gained from a post-mortem examination. In addition, it also acts as a leash, keeping the branch clan members in line. Any main family members can use a specific chant to activate the seal, causing great pain to any branch family member that gets out of line, said Zenith with sad disgust. Personally, I find the whole thing barbaric and outdated, and unless something changes there is going to be a major revolt from the branch family members. Hinata looked distraught. Few people knew of this ancient clan tradition, but out of nowhere this stranger came and seemed to know everything about it. Could his powers let his see into her mind and pull the information of it like a thief in the night? Thought the young heir to herself. But her fears were waylaid with a smile from Zenith. No, I don't read minds, but I am well versed in seal's cub. My maternal grandfather, who was a sealing master, was commissioned some years ago by an unknown Hyuga main family member to find a way to reverse the seal, and was given all the information he could get on it, its application, and the power needed to use or apply it. He studied it up until his death, and he had come very close to a way of removing the seal. He had done enough to allow a novice like me to finish it, and although it is not the most refined of techniques, it does work, he said calmly. Not that that isn't fascinating, but what does it have to do with the boy's condition? Asked Kakashi seriously. Everything. The genjutsu used on him was distorted by his seal and thus put him into this state. The only way to save him is to remove the seal and then release the jutsu. The only problem is that the technique I created to do so can only be done by one of the main house bloodline, said Zenith, resignedly letting that tidbit sink in. Kakashi looked at Hinata, realizing what the watcher was implying. You realize what you are asking her to do, don't you? To go against her clan, her family, her entire way of life, he demanded. Yes, it is a burden to bear, but it is her choice. If she releases the seal, then the boy can tell us what happened and what the situation is with the SAR team. If she doesn't, then... Don't talk like Hinata-chan is not here, yelled Naruto, interrupting the Zenith. What do the two of you know about this decision? Nothing, that's what. You talk about this like she isn't here, but she is, so tell her what she needs to know to make her decision. The two adults looked at the young child, surprised by his outburst. How did one so young become so wise? From the mouths of babes, thought Zenith to himself. I'm sorry, Naruto, and you are right, this is Hinata's decision, he said aloud with a small sigh. The young Hyuga heir blushed deeply. Few people ever stood up for her in her life, and to have the person she most admired to do so. Well, any sane person would blush under the circumstances. Zenith spent the next few minutes explaining as simply as possible what she needed to do and the possible consequences of the procedure. The seals used were standard but put together in a very complex pattern, and the amount of chakra was small but had to be molded just so or the procedure wouldn't work, and with Hinata finite amount of chakra for one so young, they would have one shot or Neji would die. So how does this work? Asked the young heir, having decided to at least attempt to save her cousin. Well, the series of seals is way too complex for me to teach you in the length of time we have. So what we will do is link ourselves through our chakra. Make it so that what one person does the other will follow, said Zenith as he readied the area around Neji's body for what had to be done. Is that safe? Asked Kakashi skeptically. Relatively, it is like forging chakra strings, only instead of attaching it to weapons you attach it to another person, said Zenith reassuringly. The procedure took at least 10 minutes of prep work and another 5 for Zen and Hinata to link their chakra. Okay, cub, now don't worry and focus on molding the chakra. My hands will do all the work, said Zenith calmly as he stood at the foot of Neji's still body. Hi, was all the nervous heir could muster as she stood opposite the watchword. Slowly Zenith brought his hands up, forming the bird seal, Hinata's hands following a fraction of a second later. Zenith carefully shifted to the next sign, slowly picking up speed, allowing the Hyuga's hands to get used to and build up to the speed needed to perform the jutsu. Before long, both pairs of hands were nothing but blurs of motion. Even Kakashi was lucky enough to only get a good look at every third hand sign the pair performed. Then Zenith slipped into the final sign, another bird seal. Zenith severed their link and looked up at the young heir, her face a mask of cold concentration. Kaien Jutsu. Caged bird release, she called before dropping her left hand and position her right index and middle perfectly straight, channeling the chakras she had collected into them, causing a green glow to emanate from the fingers. Then with speed that only came from tutoring in the gentle fist style, pulled her hand back and jabbed down towards the X mark in the center of Neji's forehead and called, Kai. As her fingers made contact, Hinata watched in awe as her chakra flowed into Neji's seal. The X sign on the mark began to spin rapidly before slowing and finally stopping, now forming a cross. The entire seal glowed brightly before vanishing. Zenith quickly ran over and focused his chakra before taping Neji on the head. Release. With that, the young Neji's eyes popped open and said in a hoarse voice, Kumo Nin attacked the SAR team, before the young man collapsed into unconsciousness. Zenith chuckled to himself, well, that's just great, the rescuees have now become the rescuers, he said with a sigh. Kakashi looked over at the watch. You do have backup plan, I hope, the copy Nin deadpanned. Yeah, wing it like I always do, Zenith responded with a smirk as he began formulating what could be the resemblance of a plan. And hope luck is with us. Zenith held his head in his hands and sighed. He was exhausted. No, he was beyond exhausted. There were words for how tired he was. The little fact that the young Hyuga had reveled about the SAR team being captured by the Kumo Nin who were to meet Hinata and Naruto's kidnappers was not happy news for the group. Right now Kakashi had gone ahead to scout the situation. Zenith had chosen to stay behind and keep watch, which was perhaps best because the Anbu captain more than likely had no experience dealing with cubs. Zenith was no expert either, but he was smart enough to let Share and Taylor deal with them since having them around seemed to bring out the pair's maternal instincts. Right now Zenith watched with a smile as Taylor attempted to keep her rambunctious charge for following Kakashi. But I can help, yelled Naruto as he attempted to dodge around Taylor for the 5th time, only to end up confronted by the tigress again. A ninja knows when to fight and when to not fight. Right now is not the time to fight but to plan and gather intel. Only then can you hope to succeed. And right now Naruto-kun, the best for you to do that is to stay here and help Zenith-sama and protect Hinata-chan, she said coldly as she stared unwaveringly at the blonde. But Zen is like super powerful, he is still human, and is under the same human limitations as anyone. Yes, he is blessed with great power, but great power means nothing unless you know how to wield it. Right now Cub, the best use of your power is to stay and help Zenith-sama, said Taylor sternly. Naruto looked like he was about to mouth back, but strangely enough thought the better of it. Apparently having a guardian who can easily tear you to shreds causes one to grow some common sense. The young cub muttered darkly under his breath about smart-ass tigresses and a few other words not heard in polite conversation before he plopped his butt on the ground pouting. Zenith could only smirk at the exchange. But his amusement soon diminished as he looked up towards the sky and sighed. The sun would set soon and then the moon would rise, the first full moon of the month, Lunar's night. And for the first time in ages he was actually glad about it instead of harping and complaining about how annoying this time of the month was. He then looked over at the young Hyuga heir who sat silently near her cousin with Share coiled around her protectively. Why did he do it? Hinata muttered softly as tears steadily leaked out of her eyes. You are of the main house, it is his duty to protect you as it is your duty to one day lead your clan, said Share sagely. But I can't lead them. How can I lead a clan that would inflict something like the caged bird seal on its own members just because of who they were born to? Besides, they will not follow me. I have heard father speak with the elders, many saying that I am unfit and not strong enough to lead, said young cub sadly. You are strong enough, Hinata. You are just young and still growing. Right now is the time of your parents, but when you eventually come into your own, then it will be your time and no one can take that from you but yourself. Take comfort in that fact if nothing else, cub, said Share comfortingly as she snuggled closer to Hinata. Hinata shook her head dejectedly. I'm not strong enough. Oto-san said that by the time he was my age he had already mastered the basics and had begun learning the 64 palm technique. I haven't even gotten to the point where I can call the Byakugan without using hand signs. Share sighed to herself. Humans could be so cruel to each other, even their young. If the Hyugas had been one of the families in the tiger clans, then Lady Raiga would have killed them herself and adopted the young to raise as her own. But that wasn't the case, and right now she needed to give the cub some hope. Share looked over at Taila and her young charge and remember how Hinata would look at Naruto when no one was looking and would blush redder than a tomato. That was how the idea began to form. It was a risk, but then most things worthwhile usually were. Hinata-chan, look over at Naruto and tell me what you see, asked Share softly. The cub looked at the tigress wide-eyed and shook her head and blushed. Why not? Do you fear him like the adults? Do you believe the things they call him behind his back? She asked. No, I admire Naruto-kun, answered Hinata, blushing an even deeper shade of red. Admire? Why? He is only a shabby orphan. What could he possibly do to earn the respect of the great heir of the Hyuga clan? She asked with mocking indignation. He's not a shabby orphan, he's strong and kind, and has big dreams of being the Hokage someday and having everyone recognize him as a person, Hinata retorted sharply. And you admire him for that, and not because he is the subject of the only law in Konoha that if broken is punishable by death? Responded the tigress slyly. Nani? Said Hinata, looking confused. Yes, the reason behind the law is the reason the villagers hate him and why he was captured along with you in this Kumo kidnapping attempt, said Share sagely. The villagers don't hate Naruto. But they talk about him behind his back, do they not? They tell their children stay away from him, they call him demon, and they treat him like a pariah. Have you never asked why that was? Asked Share. Hinata could only shake her head. Why hadn't she asked for the reason Naruto was treated the way he was? Unfortunately, it is not my place to give you the answers, but when you find them out for yourself, you will find that the burden you bear is not as heavy as it seems, and that is a comforting thought, said Share with what equated to a tiger-like grin as she snuggled closer next to her charge, whose mind now raced with questions. Zenith smiled from his position. Trust Share to put the cub on the right path without violating the rules and setting it up so that she figures it out for herself. Though if she had a mind to, the tigress could have just come right out and told her, then defending herself by stating that, the laws of men hold no more sway over me than the laws of nature hold sway over you. But on the other side of the coin, when confronted about why she didn't come right out and tell her, the tigress would say, the lesson unknowingly learned can be far more fruitful than the knowledge overly prepared. It was well past dusk when Kakashi returned from his scouting expedition. He found the group sitting around a small fire eating some of the game the two tigresses had caught and had been skillfully prepared by the young Hyuga. It ain't ramen, but it comes a close second, said Naruto in between bites. The compliment caused another blushing spell for the young Hyuga. About time you got back, Kakashi. We almost didn't save you any if the bottomless pit there had gotten his way, said Zenith with a laugh, nodding over to Naruto as he passed him a skewer of roasted rabbit. The Anbu captain nodded in thanks, accepting the welcomed meal. He stuck the long end of the skewer in the ground to let the meat cool while he pulled off his porcelain mask. The two cubs were interested in seeing the face of the man had been traveling with them for more than a day. They gasped in shock as they saw that the silver-haired Jonin had only one eye, his Hittite obscuring his left eye but left a small amount of the lower portion of his scar in sight. Well, the situation is not good, said Kakashi as he answered Zenith's unasked question. Zenith looked up from his food. How many? 3 Jonin and 4 Chunin by my count, almost all of them in my bingo book from my observations, answered the copy nin. Kuso, and how many hostages? Kakashi gave the watcher a very serious look. Both Hyuga Hizashi and Lord Hiyashi were captured along with another Anbu, 2 Jonin, and a genjutsu specialist Chunin named Yuhi Kuranai, he said sadly. That's not good. Any injuries? Asked Zenith, now seriously ticked. There didn't seem to be. They all look like they were put under the same jutsu that was the elder Hyuga child we found. Seems the effect we saw only happens when the technique is used on children younger than 8. Anyway, I think our best chance will. We make our move tomorrow, said Zenith sternly, cutting the Anbu off. Excuse me? Responded Kakashi. I don't know whether or not you understand that 4 Konoha ninja plus the head of one of the village's most powerful clans along with his brother are being held by enemy forces, and you are just going to sit there and wait till morning. No, I will not be sitting here, said Zenith resignedly. He let out a heavy sigh before standing, grabbing his pack, and starting to walk towards a clearing. Follow if you wish, but no matter what happens, do not interfere, he said, pausing briefly before continuing onward. The group was in stunned silence. Then, without saying anything, Naruto rushed off to follow, Taila trailing no more than a step behind. Hinata shocked by the movement before rushing to follow. Kakashi looked at Share, who shared a brief look before following the others. It was a few minutes before the group had joined up with him in the clearing, and he had had more than enough time to set up for what he needed to do. The candles had been set at the 4 compass points and lit. He had set the circle barrier. Now all that was left was to wait for moonrise. "I know I'm going to regret asking this, but what in Kami's name are you doing?" asked Kakashi as he entered the clearing. When it was discovered that the descendants of the original Jinchuriki could transform like their predecessors, it was assumed that the same blessed charms would be able to hold back the bestial presence within a watch were. That assumption was wrong. It turned out that the charm's power was supplemented by the excess chakra of the Jinchuriki themselves. Since essentially they were 2 beings in one, they could power the charm easily, but for their children it wasn't the case. Their chakra, while augmented by their parents' unique heritage, didn't possess the capacity of their parents. In the end, a new method was developed to fuel the charms, the power of the gods themselves, said Zenith sadly. At that moment the pieces began to fall in place as Kakashi realized what was going on. "You're refueling, aren't you?" he asked plainly. "The term is praying, but essentially yes. Every month, depending on the type of watch, where we pray and beseech our respective god on the night when they are most powerful to endow us with the power to hold back the darkness that resides within each one of us. For me as a follower of Lunanara, the night of her greatest power is the first night of the full moon, and during that time of worship all who wish to do a watch where harm will be rendered unconscious until sunrise," answered Zenith honestly. "So you understand, the Kumo Nin are not going anywhere right now." The Anbu nodded in understanding. They had time to mount a well-planned rescue. For Naruto, however, it was Zenith's attitude that was bugging him. "Zen, is something the matter?" he asked concernedly. Zenith sighed heavily. Nothing is wrong, cub. But remember this, everything has a price, and this is just mine," said the watchwar as he knelt down in the space he'd prepared. Clasping his hands in the form of the tiger seal, Zenith closed his eyes and began to softly chant in a strange complex language. At that moment the atmosphere seemed to still, the sounds of nature died away as the world around them became utterly silent, and lastly a strange presence seemed to permeate the area. What is this strange power? It almost feels like the night when the Kyuubi attacked, but without the malevolence. It's unearthly to be certain, but oddly comforting, thought the Jonin, and was about to speak but was silenced by the tigresses. "Unless you don't value your voice, shinobi, stay silent," demanded Share forcefully. "The goddess walks among us and does not take kindly to interruptions," warned Taila. Kakashi looked at the pair incredulously and was about to refute their statement when he felt it again. The presence, but this time he recognized it. He hadn't felt it in years but could recognize it even after decades. "Ka-san? It's been a while, mistress, since you've contacted me directly," thought Zenith once he felt the familiar presence of the he-goddess. "It has been a while since you warranted guidance, my son," said Lunanara in the voice of Zenith's mother. "I see you wish to once again attempt to train an apprentice? The mistake I made with will not be repeated. The boy is starved for attention and seeks recognition of his existence. He has much potential, he only lacks someone to bring it out," said Zenith respectfully. "And once again you believe that only you can do that. I warned you last time of the dangers of training and you disregarded me then," stated Lunanara warningly. "That was a different situation. The boy already has the power within him. Eventually he will have to learn how to control it or it will consume him. You've seen what can happen if a Jinchuriki is not properly trained in the use of his powers. I will not let what is happening in Suno repeat itself. If you will not let me train him, then I will at least protect him from those fools in Kahona that run route. I will not see that boy become a monster," said Zenith sternly. Lunanara sighed heavily. The situation regarding Uzumaki Naruto was clouded even to the god's eyes. Even Vampirus, the eldest and wisest of the 3 moon gods, could not part the fog that surrounded the boy's destiny. But the facts were the facts. The boy would need training, and she would rather have Zenith train him now before he undertook his shinobi responsibilities than leave it to chance. "Very well then, my son, you may train him, with my blessings. Now receive my light so that you may continue to illuminate the darkness in the world," said Lunanara. Kakashi didn't know what happened. Zenith had been kneeling in prayer for what seemed only 5 minutes when his pendant flared with green light just as the full moon rose over the treetops, bathing the clearing with its glow. The gem cackled with energy before Zenith let out a roar of pain as the gem's energy began to course through his body. "Zenith-san!" yelled Kakashi as he attempted to reach him only to be stopped by Taylor. "Remember what he said, watch if you must but don't not interfere, no matter what," reminded the tigress. "How can we just stand by and not interfere, huh?" yelled Naruto as he struggled against Share, who was holding him back by his shirt tail. "Because we have to," said Hinata sadly. Both Naruto and Kakashi looked at her incredulously. "Ka-san once told me the story of the watch wearers, how they protected people but they paid a price for it. For every good thing they do, an evil must be done to maintain the balance. So rather than having the evil inflicted on others, the watch wearers chose to have it inflicted on them," said the young Hyuga. Kakashi's eyes widened in shock. "They put themselves through this pain every month just so that they can help others?" he thought to himself. "Why would someone do that?" asked Naruto. "Because Zenith-sama is a good person with many precious people. And when you have precious people, you will do anything to protect them," said Taylor as Zenith's screams finally died, leaving the watcher unconscious. Neji groaned and sat up slowly. His whole body felt like he had gone through heavy training with his father for about a week without sleep. He squinted his eyes shut, bared his teeth, and visibly cringed as he sat up, but he would not cry out. Hyugas did not cry nor show pain. They persevered and fought through it in order to become stronger. "You're going to crack a tooth if you keep that up, kid," said a deep resonating voice. Neji's eyes snapped open in shock. There before him was the form of a large black panther. For the first time in his short life, Neji was scared. He had heard stories about panther attacks. Grown men, even fully trained shinobi, were said to be torn limb from limb by the beasts. Now here he was, face to face with one, and he was frozen with fear. "Calm yourself, whelp. If I was here to kill you," said the panther as it began to lie down as if to take a nap, "you would already be dead." Neji gulped when he felt something brush past him. He turned his head and there behind him was another panther. But unlike his companion, this one had a long red scar that ran from under his eye, curved at his cheek, and crossed his neck, as well as a blood-red pendant that hung around it. The creature looked at Neji with his head cocked, its eyes filled with concern. He then snapped his head around to gazing at the first. The first panther opened his one eye and gazed at his partner. "Don't give me that look, Scar. The whelp is fine and unharmed, just like Furfus wanted," he said uncaringly. The second panther, Scar, growled softly before curling down next to Neji. Neji looked from Scar to the first panther nervously. "Don't go wetting yourself, whelp. Scar there was raised by those softies in the Tiger clan before he rejoined his real family. He can no more hurt a child than he can talk, which is to say he can't," said the unknown panther coldly. "Now Kurga, you should know better than to terrorize the young of a shinobi, especially a Hyuga child," said a female voice. "Unlike you Tiger clan softies Taylor, we panthers don't worry about the retaliation of the flesh bags," said Kurga scathingly. "Try it, furball, and you'll be my new throw rug before you can even pounce," said Kakashi as he entered the clearing. Zenith draped over his shoulders and Naruto and Hinata behind him riding Share. Kurga's head perked up. "Sharingan Kakashi, the type of company you and Furfus are keeping certainly has improved since he last summoned me. Least he's not hanging out with that psycho kindness bitch and that creepy vampirous freak," the panther said coldly. "At least this guy is completely human," but then again, he looked at Naruto and Hinata coldly. "That boy is as far from human as you can get, and Hyugas in general can't really." Kurga never got a chance to finish as he found a kunai knife aimed at his neck on one side and an angry growl on the other. "Careful how you finish that sentence, or, panther or not, I will kill you," said Neji coldly, while Scar's growl conveyed that he would let the boy do it too. "Kurga, can't you, for once in your life, not piss off everyone you meet?" said Zenith groggily as he returned to consciousness. "Kakashi, you can set me down now," he said with a chuckle. Naruto and Hinata quickly cleared an area for Zenith. Zenith gave them a smile of thanks before looking over at the still-standing Neji. "I'd sit down if I were you, cub, before your adrenaline wears off and you collapse from the pain." Neji looked at the watch were like he was crazy when a fresh wave of pain washed over him that forced him to a knee. Scar rushed over and slipped under his arm, acting as a living crutch. Neji looked at the panther curiously, the look in its, no his, eyes were a mix of worry and what looked like concern. The two stared at each other for a moment, then nodded to each other before Scar helped the Hyuga male to a spot next to Zenith. "Ni-san, are you alright?" asked Hinata as she helped Neji sit. Neji just nodded. "I'm surprised he lasted as long as he did. The shock of having something like the caged bird removed would have had most people down after more than a minute," remarked Zenith with a smirk. "He's a Hyuga, anything less than exceptional is considered a failure by them," remarked Kurga coolly. "Don't you have a patrol to perform, Kurga Teme?" said Zenith loudly. "If you wanted me gone Furfus, you only had to ask," said Kurga before leaping into the trees and vanishing. The group watched as the panther vanished before Naruto voiced the question the humans of the group were wondering. "How the hell do you know that creep Zen?" Zenith chuckled before he winced slightly. "Amazing the loyalty a being shows when they owe you their lives," he remarked with a smirk. "Why the hell did you save that waste of fur's life?" asked Naruto bluntly. "To be honest, I'm rather curious myself," Zenith remarked Kakashi, concurring with Naruto. "Kurga pissed off the wrong people. I saved his sorry ass." "Enough said," said Zenith coolly as he looked over at Neji, who was tentatively touching his forehead. "You're not dreaming, it's gone and you can thank your cousin for that." Neji looked from Zenith to Hinata. He had heard the remarks made by the elders about her, at how disappointing she was and how they should shift the inheritance of clan leadership to her soon-to-be-born sibling, or how better things would be if Hizashi had been born first and he was made heir. For Neji, such things couldn't be stopped. Fate meant for him to serve as a branch family member and Hinata to lead the clan. Nothing can change fate, but then why did fate allow this man to release him from the caged bird? "Thank you, Hinata-sama," said Neji with a slightly bow to her. "Please Neji ni-san, Zenith did all the work," said Hinata shyly. "I only gave you the tools, cub, you were the one who used them," said Zenith sagely with a kind smile. "Nevertheless, thank you for saving me," said Neji seriously. "Well, if you want to repay us, you can tell us who else the Kumo team has hostage besides your father and uncle," said Zenith, getting back to the problem at hand. Neji's brow furrowed for a moment as he thought, his mind still hazy from being under the genjutsu. "I never saw the Anbu's face. He never took off his weasel mask even to eat. There was the Chunin genjutsu specialist Yuhi Kurenai," and paused as he thought carefully, then his eyes widened as he realized who else was with them. "Uchiha Shisui," he said sadly. "Oh, you have got to be kidding me," yelled Zenith as he collapsed onto his back. "Fate hates me, that would be the only reason something like this would happen," he muttered to himself. Kakashi let out a groan before falling to the ground. Naruto looked at the adults curiously. "I don't get it. What difference it makes that they have one more shinobi captured?" he asked. "Cub, Uchiha Shisui aka Shisui of the Body Flicker. Second fastest shinobi in Konoha after the Yellow Flash and the strongest Sharingan user after the Uchiha prodigy Uchiha Itachi was taken down by them. This isn't any ordinary Kumo squad. Taking out a Hyuga or an Uchiha alone is one thing. Taking out both at the same time is far too difficult. Even a cage would have difficulty with that task," Zenith said, now thoroughly disturbed, before looking at Neji again. "Tell me, do you remember anything about this squad that was unusual?" Neji furrowed his brow and thought again. The memories were incredibly hazy. Their leader was a large man, not tall but muscular, like he was carved from stone. He had a pair of twin axes on his back that looked like a full-grown man would have trouble lifting just one of them. And a ruby pendant around his neck shaped that seemed to glow. Then his eyes went wide as he recalled the moments just before he was put under. Flashback. His father had bought him time. He ran for his life. He had fought against his father in many matches, but never once had he shown uncertainty until now. This enemy was unknown to them and very powerful. He had taken out the Anbu and the Uchiha Jonin with one shot before either could react, and his father and uncle were barely holding them off. He had just come to a clearing where he thought he was safe and thought to rest for a moment when he heard the snarling sound behind him. He barely had enough time to activate his Byakugan before he fell into dark unconsciousness, the sight of black fur and soulless yellow eyes being the last thing he would ever see. End flashback. The leader was able to summon leopards, was all Neji could get out before all hell broke loose. At the sound of the word leopards, the three felines of the group immediately went stone still and looked at Zenith. The look on his face was not one of tiredness but of resolve and fear. The Watcher quickly stood and yelled, "Kurga!" calling back his other panther summons. "You know Furfus, you really need to make up your mind. First you want me here, then you want me gone. Now," started the surly panther before Zenith cut him off with one word. "Leopards, what?" asked the normally surly Kurga, his eyes narrowing as if wanting for a punchline to a joke that would never come. Apparently those Kumo bastards are led by one of those psycho followers of Magnus. That was how the SAR team got captured. Zenith said in a tone of cold seriousness. The panther looked at the Watcher in the eye for a moment as if having an unspoken conversation. They both nodded before Kurga looked at the three still stunned felines incredulously. "What the hell are you three waiting for? An invitation? We have patrols to run. Get your sorry asses up and let's go," yelled Kurga ferociously before leaping into the treetops, followed closely by Scar. Share and Taylor both looked at Zenith for confirmation. The Watcher gave them both a serious look. "You heard him, go," he yelled. "Hi Zenith-sama," said the pair before heading off into the trees themselves. "I take it things just got a lot worse, didn't it?" asked Kakashi carefully as he noted the pure fury that was being broadcast by the Watcher. "Worse, no dear Captain. Things just went straight to hell, that is what happened," said Zenith coldly before he stood up and began pacing. "I don't understand, Zenith Aniki. What is the problem with that man being able to summon leopards?" asked Naruto. Zenith was so out of it he didn't even bother to note that the cub had called him Big Brother. "Because leopards are the servants of Magnus the Dark One," said Zenith quietly. Hinata's eyes went wide and her skin went even paler than its current color. She quickly grasped Naruto's hand and attempted to hide behind him while the blonde gulped nervously. The boy, having learned to read by reading comic books, knew that all the worst villains had names like that, and if it could get the normally cool and collected Zenith this out of whack, then this guy had to be 10 times worse than those guys. The scene itself would have been very cute if the situation had not been so serious. "And just who is Magnus the Dark One?" asked Kakashi while the little voice in his head that sounded like his sensei was yelling, "You don't want to know." Zenith looked at the group and sighed. "For everything in the universe there is an equal opposite. Fire and water, earth and air, land and sea, life and death, light and darkness. Just as there is the 3 moon gods that help protect us, there is one who does not. He is known as Magnus the Dark One. Back before the moon gods came to power, Magnus ruled with an iron fist until his brother Cainus, his wife Lunanara, and his comrade Vampirus rose up and challenged him. The war lasted for millennia until the 3 overpowered Magnus and cast him into the abyss, and the 3 took their place as the moon gods. But Magnus endured so long as his followers believed in him. With their faith he will live on. He can no longer stand against the moon gods themselves. His followers are too few for that. But he can bestow great power on those who serve him faithfully. On earth his leopards are his eyes and ears, the entire clan having sold themselves into his service for power. Only his human followers can sign the contract to summon them, and it is only to his will that they are truly subservient to. So why did you send those 4 out to patrol? I thought that anyone who wished to harm a Watcher were incapacitated on the night you had to recharge your pendant, said Kakashi. Normally true, but Magnus' followers are not rendered unconscious on these nights, only paralyzed, but his leopards are immune to the force the gods send out on these nights. I sent Kurga and the others out to patrol for any spies that might be watching us. But that will be difficult since those bastards are practically invisible in the shadows, and right now we need a plan to get the others back, said Zenith. How do we intend to rescue our rescuers when we have not only a Magnus follower but a full squad of shinobi to back him up? Remarked Kakashi. Zenith sighed. We give the Kumo shinobi the opportunity they want. Kakashi and the 2 kids stared at Zenith incredulously. Neji's eyes bulged as he instinctively activated his Byakugan. I will not let you endanger Hinata-sama's life like this, no matter what you did for me, yelled the young Hyuga branch family member. I don't see any other choice. If the kids lure the Chunin away into an ambush, then once that's done the 3 of us plus Kurga and Scar take our Jonin and finish off their leader on our terms, said Zenith sadly. It's too risky. If this fails, you know we won't get another shot at saving them, said Kakashi. That is why we won't fail, said Zenith. Reluctantly both males nodded. Zenith looked to the children, about to say that if they didn't want to do this they could back out, but remarkably the cubs never moved. Zen smiled ruefully as he began to lay out his plan. Are you sure about this? Asked the lead Kumo Nin when his leopard summons returned from his recon patrol. Without a doubt, I can smell the followers of the traitors a mile away. Kai and his partner failed and the packages fell into the hands of a watchwar, one of Lunanara's followers from the look of his familiars. Said the leopard coldly. The man flexed his fingers gingerly. The effect of the wave that knocked out his camp and paralyzed him was sudden but not unexpected. Very slowly he was regaining movement, but he wouldn't be able to move fully, nor would his men wake until dawn. This doesn't change much, but it makes things a lot more interesting. Set a watch on the enemy camp and stay out of sight. If you see an opportunity to take back our parcels, do so, otherwise I will join you tomorrow. Said the Kumo Nin coolly. As you wish, said the leopard before it vanished. It was an hour past dawn when the Kumo task force second in command finally awoke from his sound sleep. It had been one of those nights. He had only just sat down to eat something when he felt a wave of chakra pass over him and he collapsed into blissful unconsciousness. When he awoke, he found that the task force's so-called leader had left with the two specially assigned Chunin on an apparent scouting mission. Yeah, and I'm next in line for rakeage. Not likely, he said to himself as the Chunin gave him the status report. Supposed to be a simple retrieval mission, go and get the parcels and get out. Now the couriers are late and our leader, ice out scouting the area. You know what they say, boss, a shinobi's life is anything but simple, remarked the Chunin officer as they made their way through camp. That's why I'm retiring once this mission is over with. Besides, if our so-called leader is the kind of man that the rakeage is dealing with nowadays, I'd rather hang up my forehead protector and get out while I can, said the two IC coldly as they checked on their 6 currently unconscious prisoners. Well, at least the mission is not a total loss. We have the head of the Hyuga clan and his eyes should prove to be even more valuable than that brat of his, and not one but 2 Uchihas. The legendary Shisui of the Body Flicker and the Crimson Dragon of Konoha's Enbu, also known as Uchiha Itachi. That should more than make up for the loss of the 2 parcels, he thought to himself. He then looked over to where the 2 other Jonins they had captured once were detained. They were veterans and had proven troublesome by attempting an escape just prior to last night's strange occurrence. The leader had at least been merciful and had granted them a quick death, before feeding the corpses to those damn leopards of his. Then there was the female. She was a relatively new, not even having a bingo book entry yet, but he had heard the rumors of young up-and-coming genjutsu mistress out of Konoha and couldn't help but wonder. He was about to head back to his tent at that point to change clothes when a fellow Jonin appeared breathing heavily. Sir Huff, you must puff, come quickly, pant. What is it? Asked the 2 IC curtly. You need to see it for yourself, sir, said the Jonin with a smile. He quickly led the 2 to the heart of camp, and their tied, bound and unconscious was Hitaki Kakashi, and the 2 missing parcels Hyuga Hinata and Uzumaki Naruto. The Chunin aide couldn't help but smile broadly. What happened? How did? Found the 2 kids down by a stream from the looks of it, catching breakfast. We moved in and split up to catch them in a pincer when one group got caught off guard by the great copycat. The other group detained the 2 kids and let one of them scream to catch the copycat off guard enough to overpower him, said one of the Chunin proudly. Good job, men, said the 2 IC with a smile as he checked the prisoners. He had only reached over to check the Hyuga girl's face when her eyes snapped open. But instead of lavender pupil-less eyes, he found a pair of cold golden cat's eyes staring back at him. Boo, was only thing the girl said before things went straight to hell. Are you sure it's safe to just walk into their camp like this? Asked Kakashi as he followed Zen into what once was the Kumo base camp, followed closely by Naruto, who absolutely refused to stay behind with Kurga or Neji, much to Hinata's dismay. Yeah, the girls and Scar should have had enough time to clean things up, said Zenith as they continued through the camp. They were about a quarter the way through when they halted to what was a surprising sight. There, leaning up against a tree picking his fingernails with a kunai knife without a care in the world, was an exact duplicate of Kakashi. Whoa, but how? Asked Naruto, looking from one Kakashi to another confused. Good henge, almost had me fooled, chuckled the real Kakashi. I'm no henge copycat, said the duplicate with what could have passed for a cocky Kakashi tone. The original looked confused. A basic henge only had the form, not the voice of the person being duplicated. Only a more advanced henge could voice mimic, but the chakra being given off was minimal at most, so how? Enough, Scar. You keep this up and the scarecrow here is liable to have a stroke for all the thinking you're making him do, said Zenith with a chuckle. With a snort the doppelganger moved towards the group, and as it did seem to go fuzzy and unfocused before turning back into the form of Scar, who gave a throaty chuckle as he sat on his haunches in front of Kakashi. It's called shadow bending. Members of the Panther clan can manipulate their shadows and through them their bodies into any living thing. Scar is the best there has been in the last century. He only has to see a person and hear their voice once in order to become that person, responded Zenith to the unspoken question written on Kakashi and Naruto's face. But Furball said that Scar can't talk, said a confused Naruto. That is true, in his true form Scar can't talk, but when he becomes someone else, he physically becomes them. Anything that person can do physically he can do. If said person has a Kekkei Genkai, then Scar can copy it as long as he remains in that form, said Zenith proudly. Impressive, with the amount of chakra he used I suppose he can hold a form indefinitely, remarked Kakashi with a small note of envy. Kakashi, don't you know nothing is perfect? Everything has a drawback, a price. While shadow bending the user halts his or her chakra reproduction, leaving the person with only the chakra in reserve and whatever is being used by the body naturally, said Zenith gravely. So what you are saying is that if he lets the jutsu go too long he'll die, said Naruto with a gulp. Zenith only nodded gravely in responses. Naruto gulped at that thought. Ji-san had taught him the basics of chakra during one of his visits and knew that everything need chakra to survive. Ji-san had even told him that chakra could be considered the spark of life that all things from small ants to huge trees had in common, and to manipulate it was what allowed ninjas to do the amazing things they did. But if one used up too much then the effects could be very bad. Zenith could see the concerned look on the cub's face. He quickly shifted attention away from such dismal matters that shouldn't plague such a young mind and had them move on towards Share and Tila's location. None of them were very talkative, Zenith-sama, when we tried to interrogate, said Tayla grouchily as she led them past the currently unconscious former hostages. They also put up some type of barrier, they didn't tell us what it's for. We hope that you might have better luck, said Share as the pair escorted the group to where the Kumo nins were being held before resuming the work of untying the hostages. Save for a few of the nin, they were all unconscious. Zenith smirked slightly as crouched down next to one of the conscious Kumo nin, one that was obviously one of the leaders. Lead ninjas had an aura about them that was easy to pick up if one knew what to look for. Kakashi had picked it up also since he was standing behind him giving the nin a cold look. Said Ninja chuckled sarcastically, well, should I be shaking in my boots? The famous Sharingan Kakashi, and surprisingly enough the highest non-shinobi bounty in the bingo book of the 5 hidden villages. Lazura Zenith. I'm overwhelmed, he said with a laugh. You will be. Now why are you here and why did you kidnap 2 Konoha citizens? Asked Kakashi coldly. I said I was overwhelmed, not struck, dumb copycat. I have nothing to say except that me and my men were on a training mission and have no knowledge of a kidnap attempt, said the head nin with sarcastic innocence. Kakashi scowled and looked ready to pounce on him. Zenith however burst into a fit of laughter. Forgive me, but you got to love shinobi. So prideful, so arrogant, so sure of themselves. Don't worry my Kumo friend, if your story clears, you and yours will be free to go, said the Watcher with false reassurance. And just how do you intend to verify my story? Asked the nin. Zenith only smiled briefly before his hand moved quickly to the sides of the shinobi's head, his thumbs placed on his eyelids holding his eyelids open. The smile vanished like a breath replaced with a mask of cold concentration. The shinobi struggled briefly before he gasped as Zen activated his dojutsu and began to chant. The shinobi soon went completely slack, his eyes staring back at Zenith's. After a moment Zen stopped and dropped the now unconscious ninja's head before standing up and turning to Kakashi. Well? Asked the Anbu. The barrier is to ensure that the hostages remain unspoiled. It'll let people through it, but any projectiles or jutsu will be deflected. Also the team leader left this morning on patrol with what appeared to be 2 ninja he brought with him, and from what I can read, this guy was not exactly loved and respected by his teammates. Get Naruto with the hostages and get ready for company, said Zenith seriously. Too late, company is already here, said a weak husky voice from behind them. Their battered to near death was Kurga. The usually proud panther had a pronounced limp and one eye swelled shut. He took a few more steps forward before he collapsed in a heap. Kurga, in a flash, Zenith was beside his fallen summons, giving him a once-over. His breathing was shallow and his voice was huskier than usual. "Sorry Furfus, I tried to stop them but he was too strong, he overpowered me and took the Gakis. I barely had enough strength to get here to warn you," said Kurga weakly. "Warn me of what, Kurga?" asked Zenith seriously. "Kenta's alive." And with those words Kurga vanished in a puff of smoke, returning to the summoning realm. Zenith could only stare at the spot that Kurga had just occupied in shock when he heard the sound. A sound he hated more than anything. "Drop!" he cried, pulling Naruto to the ground and covering him as a pair of huge axes whizzed by, barely grazing Zenith's back. Zenith could only watch with horror as the axes continued their path straight through the captured Kumo Nen before turning and returning to the treetops and the hands of their master, who only let out a sickeningly psychotic laugh. A laugh Zenith was familiar with all too well. Well, isn't this a pretty sight? I get hired to kill some ninja and instead I get my hands on you, runt," said the laughing voice. Zenith picked his head up, and there on a branch above them was what could literally be considered a giant. He was 7.5 feet of sheer bone and muscle, clad in black and green camouflage pants and a black muscle shirt. He wore heavy boots similar to Zenith's, and around his neck was a pendant of red crystal cut like a single glowing eye. In one of his bandaged hands, still dripping blood, were the offending axes, and in the other was a pair of bound sacks. Zenith stood and growled loudly, "I should have put my sword through your heart personally, Kenta." Kenta laughed again. "Please, you watchwares have always been too soft for your own good. If you weren't, then it wouldn't matter that I had them," said the psychotic merc, shaking the bags. Zenith didn't need anything more to know that Hinata and Neji were both bound in those bags. "Lowering yourself to kidnap children now? I never suspected you to fall so far, Kenta. What happened to the beast that slaughtered 5 villages, the monster that caused grown men to tremble, the lapdog of Yoshimaru?" "I am no one's lapdog," cried Kenta, violently interrupting Zenith's tirade. "I was ordered to retrieve my parcels, nothing more, but I don't think my master will deign me the pleasure of ending you." Kenta quickly snapped his fingers, causing 2 leopards to appear beside. "Deal with the Anbu and the Silent One. The watchword is mine. Share, Taila, protect Naruto," yelled Zenith as he quickly ran through a series of hand signs ending in the tiger seal. "Tora Kami no Tsurugi, sword of the tiger god," then slammed his hand into the earth and pulled out a shining sword of some kind of blue metal hilted with a silver tiger's head that seemed to be roaring, and its eyes were inlaid with what seemed to be emeralds. "You want me? Come and claim me then," roared Zenith, his dojutsu flaring to life as he charged Kenta. The merc quickly brought his axes to bear in a powerful overhead chop that would have cut a normal man, with a normal sword, in 2. But Zenith's sword is anything but normal and was able to parry the blow, forcing the beast back. Kakashi meanwhile was playing a game of cat and mouse with one of the leopard summons. "Such a yummy little flesh bag. I wonder, should I save that eye of yours? Quite a few would sell their souls for such a weapon," mocked the creature. "You'll have to pry it from my cold dead corpse first," as he ran through a quick series of seals that raised a wall of earth, blocking off one of the leopard's attacks and allowing him to counter with a quick-fire jutsu. Scar, however, was engaged in a battle of wills as the 2 summons exchanged blows like animals. No words were exchanged, only fierce attacks of pure unadulterated blunt force trauma. The battle between Zen and Kenta, however, was like a clash of titans, a clash that Kenta for the moment was winning. "He's gotten stronger since our last fight. There is no way I can beat him unless I transform, but he is one of the few that know the danger. But I have to risk it for the Hinata's. Sake and Share and Taila are here in case that happens. I have no choice," thought Zenith. He made a quick charge at Kenta, forcing the merc to hurl him back. "He's going to do it," Kenta thought to himself as he watched his opponent jam his sword into the ground and bending it back like a spring to catapult him into the air, giving him the needed time and distance for what came next. As he flew, Zenith gathered his chakra into himself, mixing it with the Wind Tiger Lord beast's power within him, and caused him to be shrouded in a green aura. Once he had enough, he formed a single tiger hand sign and cried out, "By the light of Lunanara, release the beast within." At that the chakra's shroud exploded out as Zenith let out a defining roar. He immediately felt his muscle constrict and tighten as peach flesh gave way to black on white striped fur, his mouth elongating forming a tiger's muzzle now filled with sharpened teeth, and weather-worn hands becoming long nimble claws. In moments Zenith had landed in a low crouch before Kenta, his eyes flaring with the eye of the tiger activated and his hackles rose in rage. Kenta only smiled, now he could really let loose. He quickly pulled out his second axe and crossed them before him. His face now a mix of concentration and anger as his pendant flared to life cloaking him in a red aura as his muscles bulged as his veins throbbed and pulsed clearly seen at the skin's surface and his eyes now had an unearthly red glow. Now in the full troughs of Magnus power only thought crossed Kenta's mind, this was going to be fun. Have to end this quickly, thought Zen as he let off another roar before pulling his sword out from the ground and rushed Kenta with a cry, Odori no Tsuki Yeba. Dance of the Moon Blade. As he slashed at the air releasing blades of chakra forcing Kenta to dodge quickly. Only to have Zenith move in to strike him with an uppercut that lifted the Magnus follower off the ground forcing him to roll with the momentum but also getting him into perfect position for a counter-attack. Tataku no Kurai Kami, Strike of the Dark God, called Kenta propelling himself forward and crossing his axes before him and striking in an X pattern at Zenith's chest sending the watcher back several feet. Perfect hit. Was all Kenta thought as he took a moment to observe the damage he caused. Kuso, muttered Zen as he felt the warm blood on his chest. The cuts were shallow thankfully but the force of the blow was enough to crush a normal human. Yet that wasn't what was on Zen's mind, it was the small cut to the tie that secured his pendant that currently had his interest. Can't let him get that close again, he said to himself as he fired off another barrage of Odori no Tsuki Yeba to keep Kenta off balance. But I can't keep the Odori up indefinitely. Looks like I only have one choice, thought the watcher regretfully. It'll be a risk but with luck, it will pay off. With that he dug his sword into the ground and stepped into view of Kenta. Finally ready to accept your destiny then Furball, asked Kenta readying another attack. No, just making sure you meet yours, said Zenith coldly as he began channeling chakra into his right hand giving it a green glow. Then the glow intensified into a golden glow until finally Zenith's entire forearm seemed to be engulfed in orange flame like chakra. Share and Taila sensing the buildup quickly grabbed Naruto and leapt away. Scar, Kakashi, leave them and grab Hinata and Neji. We have to get behind the barrier or we'll be caught in the aftershock. Yelled the two summonses. What after? Started Kakashi as he dodged another strike from his attacker when it hit him. The immense power being drawn on, focused, and honed. What power is this? The seal is intact so it's not Naruto, so who? Zenith was all thinking he had time for before he retrieved Hinata and Neji from their sacks before he leapt from his attacker and joined the others. Kenta however either because of the power that now coursed through him or sheer stupidity didn't run, only smirked. Is your little light show supposed to scare me runt? I have the powers of a true god running through me. It'll take more than your little hand to stop me, he cried. That's where you are wrong, for this hand burns with the holy power of Lunanara, and her burning cries call for your defeat Kenta. Now face the power of the Tataku no Megami Moeteimasu. Burning goddess strike, cried Zenith as he rushed forward his hand outstretched to strike down his foe as Kenta countered with another strike of the dark god. The group had only gotten maybe a half a mile away when the blast hit them. The force of the attack kicked up enough dirt and rock to block out the sun. Naruto actually had to bury his head in Share fur to shield his eyes. When it finally passed nothing of the clearing or the Kumo camp remained and in the distance two figures could be made out. One standing and the other collapsed. The blast of the aftershock had obliterated the barrier jutsu set up around the hostages but had held long enough to ensure that those inside it only suffered a few minor cuts and scrapes. The dust and smoke that had been kicked up though was enough to obscure even Kakashi vision. The group's tension began to ease as the dust and debris cleared revealing the battlefield. There they could see two silhouettes. One was breathing hard. The other was laid out spread eagle and, once the smoke cleared enough to see the hole at his chest, very dead. When smoke finally dissipated enough for them to see who was who, they could see that the dead body was Kenta. And there in his transformed state hunched over and breathing hard was Zenith, his hair obscuring his face. Alright Anki, I knew you'd beat that jerk, yelled Naruto as he rushed forward to embrace Zenith only to be blocked by Taylor. Stay back cub, something is wrong. Zenith-sama, are you alright? Asked the familiar watching her master with caution. With what looked like labored effort Zen began to turn towards them, his head hung and breathing ragged. Then with a sound those present thought was an ominous sign, the pendant at Zen's neck clattered to the ground. Run, was all he could say before there was enveloped in a cocoon of green chakra again, only now it was a bright venomous green color. Drop, was the only thing said before the group was enveloped by a chakra shock wave that kicked up clouds of dirt and formed several new rock formations. Kakashi had only just ducked down again when some force grabbed him and pinned him to a rock. He heard several more thumps, and when the dust finally cleared there slumped against the rock were Share and Taylor drifting in pained semi-consciousness, Naruto bound by invisible bonds, and Kurga being held by the neck, same as Kakashi by what could only be a demonic caricature of Zen in his transformed state. Where once a 6-foot man with tiger-like features once stood, there was now an 8.5-foot thing that looked like some demonic perversion of the warrior that had been there. His body was solid muscle, which were so large that they actually destroyed Zen's tunic, and his pants now were like a tight pair of shorts. His mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth with a pair of long canines glinting like ivory knives. His hair was long and wild, but what got him most were the glowing venom-green eyes. "What have I caught in my web?" said the spider to the fly, asked the creature in a demonic distortion of Zen's voice. "A copycat and a mixed breed. Coo, how delightful." "Who are you?" Kakashi struggled to ask, gasping for air through his crushed windpipe. "Oh, you know exactly who I am, Hitaki Kakashi. I am that gnawing little fear that rests in the back of your head, that dark portion of your personality. I am the darkness inside all men. I am the Lord of the Four Winds, Master of the Southern Plains and Destroyer of Civilizations. I am the Tora no Kase, Wind Tiger, reborn," said the demon coldly. Kakashi's eyes went wide with shock. How is it possible? Well, that is one of the universe's little ironies. See, everything in the cosmos seeks to create a balance. Where there is one thing you must have its opposite. I am Zenith-kun's opposite, that nasty little piece of himself that he keeps contained and forever locked away. The part of him that fully embraces the power of the Wind Tiger, it said smugly, tossing Kurga to the side, seeing that he wasn't going to wake anytime soon. But what about being the Tora no Kase reborn? If you were Zen's opposite, aren't you a Watcher also? Asked Kakashi, trying to keep the thing focused on him. You know nothing and understand even less. The Watchwares are pale imitations of us. Each Watchware born or turned contains a small fragment of the original, and as that Watchware grows, experiences, and matures, so does that fragment, becoming its own entity but still a piece of the original Wind Tiger, and far stronger than the weak jailers that contain us by those thrice damned pendants blessed by Lunanara and her flea-bitten husband and blind brother. We are bound to their subconscious. Without them we would have control of these bodies at the first hint of high emotion. But as long as that pendant remained on Zenith-kun's person, I was forced to watch as he used my power to help others and for self-sacrifice," it said with a disgusted shiver. "If Zenith-kun hadn't killed him, I would have rewarded Kenta for freeing me. Coo. Well, you're free now, so why attack us? Let me take my people back to our village and we will just started Kakashi, only to be stopped by the demon crushing his neck further. "Why would I do that when destroying you all would be so much more fun? Coo, it said with a growling laugh. Then it took a sniff and looking over at Naruto and smiled evilly. "You know, I just got an even better idea than killing you." Then with a hand wave it formed bands of air to hold Kakashi to the rock and kicking dirt into Share and Tila's faces for good measure. Then with a motion he levitated Naruto into the air, still kicking and thrashing against his bonds. "Let me go, you baka asshole, and give Zenith Ni-san back," yelled Konoha's hyperactive prankster. Coo, how charming. So feisty, you have a lot of spunk." The demon then took a sniff of Naruto. "And a lot of chakra. Just what were Zenith-kun and the copycat hiding from me about a seal? Just wah," it was saying to itself as it circled Naruto and stopped as it passed in front of him and sniffed again near his stomach. Growling, the demon tore away the lower portion of Naruto's shirt, leaving scratches that the demon watched with fascination as they healed quickly. With a light touch it placed a hand over Naruto's stomach and forced some chakra into him. The boy yelped in pain as the foreign chakra invaded his body. In a moment the normally invisible seal flashed into existence. The 4-symbol seal, powerful in itself but coupled with the 8 trigram sealing style. The only reason to combine 2 such powerful seals would be. The demon's smile then grew as it all began to fit in place. Oh, how poetic, a student suffers the fate of one of their masters. So who are you, dear Naruto-kun? What are you talking about, Toriteme? Yelled Naruto, attempting to kick his captor. You have spunk, kid, so you aren't Sanbi. He was too slow to ever develop spunk. And you are not Hachibi, as I would smell that snake's stench a mile off, and given Zenith-kun's memories you are not Shukaku. So again, who are you, Nibi? No, she would never tolerate a male form. Gobi maybe, she always had a certain rebellious streak. The demon then took a final good whiff and smirked evilly. No, I know that smell anywhere. There is no doubt it's you, Kyuubi no Kitsune. What are you talking about, you freak? The Yondaime killed the fox almost 7 years ago, you Toriteme, yelled Naruto. Really, tell me, is the anniversary of the Kyuubi's defeat also the day of your birth? Naruto gave his captor a contemptuous look and didn't give it the honor of an answer. From your lack of retort I was right. Strange that a child with whisker-like birthmarks so similar to Kyuubi's, not to mention such a high chakra capacity, just happened to be born the exact day it was killed, the demon said in cold mockery. Leave the kid alone, bastard. If you want to torture someone, try someone who can fight back, called Kakashi, trying to get the demon to return its attention to himself. Why, Kakashi, where is the fun in that? The demon chuckled. Besides, I thought you of all people would want the Gaki to learn what your dear sensei, your village's beloved 4th Hokage, did to him? Did to me? What are talking about? The old man said that a bunch of refugees were killed, among them my parents, when the Kyuubi attacked. The Yondaime saved me just before he killed the Kyuubi, yelled Naruto. So naive, so trusting of one's elders. Your dear old man told you a fairy tale that your young mind could accept instead of telling you the truth. Stop, yelled Kakashi. You can't tell him, he's not ready. And if you do, every leaf nin will have their sights on you for breaking the village's highest law, myself included, threatened Kakashi. Oh, how terrifying. An insignificant village full of insignificant men threatening my life, I'm so scared. For one so learned, Kakashi, you understand nothing. Your laws mean nothing. Your rules, nothing. Your reverence for your dear Yondaime, nothing. I am as far beyond you and your laws as you are beyond an ant and the laws of nature. Threatening me is pointless. I knew exactly what happened the moment I touched his seal, said the demon, chiding Kakashi. It then turned to refocus on Naruto with a smirk. The boy's face was a mixture of defiance and longing. He wanted his Zenith Nissan back, but he also wanted the answers the demon was offering. Why it was that everyone in the village seemed to hate him, and why only the old man Hokage and old man Ichiraku and Ayame seemed to care for him. I can give you the answers you seek, Naruto, spoke the demon, his voice like honey-coated venom. You can? He asked almost hopefully. No, Naruto, don't list, cried out Kakashi, only to have the demon silence him. Quiet, copycat, I'll deal with you in a moment, the demon said angrily before answering his captive. Yes, I can. You see, Naruto, the Yondaime didn't kill the Kyuubi. He couldn't. Beings like me, the other lord beasts, and the Biju have a certain amount of immortality in that only another one like us can truly kill us in the normal sense. For a mortal to even try to, he would have to have the help of something far stronger than us. Which is exactly what the Yondaime had. Calling on the Shinigami, he took the fox's soul and sealed it into a vessel. Now with the amount of chakra the fox had, any normal vessel would be useless. The only thing that could hold the chakra would be a human vessel, and not just any but a newborn child with a still developing chakra network that could adapt easily to the new chakra flow. So at only a few hours old, the Yondaime sealed Kyuubi inside of you and condemned you to a dark and lonely life. In that moment Naruto's entire life shattered. He didn't want to believe it, he wanted to lash out and call the Teme a liar. But some part of him knew the bastard was telling the truth. The Kyuubi was inside him. That one piece of information explained it all. The looks parents gave him, the names his attackers called him, and in that instant everything became so clear. Why did he do it? Cried Naruto as tears began to stream down his face. He did it to save you, Naruto-kun, said a voice. At once both he and the demon turned to see both Share and Talus slowly coming to their feet. He did it to save you and the village, for that is the duty of both a Hokage and a father, spoke Share. Remember the story of how the Watch Wars came to be, how the masters used their own children to save their people. It is the same thing with you, cub. The Yondaime had no other choice. How could he ask another clan to sacrifice a child of theirs if he could not do so with his own, continued Taila. Lies Naruto, the Yondaime found you on the battlefield and used you. They couldn't know if the precious fourth Hokage was your father, they were never there. Retorted the demon. But, said Kakashi, struggling against the demon's gag. I watched with joy as Arashi-sensei celebrated the news that he was to be a father. I was there in grief at the passing of your mother Kushina, and I mourned when your father gave everything to save his village and make his son a hero. So tell me, Naruto, what did your father's sacrifice purchase? Lies all of it, Naruto, don't listen to them, they don't care about you. I can give you anything you want, power, knowledge, glory. Once you are strong enough, you and I can cut a swath through this land and take what we desire. We can set armies at each other like shogi pieces, then take the spoils for ourselves, and wash our hands in the blood of our enemies, Naruto. All you have to do is say it, said the demon charmingly. Anything I want? Asked Naruto. For a moment Kakashi's one eye gave a look of horror and sadness. What I want, said Naruto softly, causing the demon to lean closer to hear him, is to have Zenith ni Sanbak Torateme. He yelled as his body flashed with Kyuubi's chakra, briefly giving him enough strength to headbutt the demon. That little distraction was enough to break the demon's focus and free Kakashi of his bonds, as well as to release the suppression technique on Share and Taila. Now Taila, while it's distracted, yelled Share as the tiger familiar began to focus her chakra. High, as the second followed suit, once the power had reached its peak, and giving Kakashi the cue to get out of the way, the pair cried out, Lunanara Majutsu, Naka no Senshi. Lunanara secret technique, inner warrior. In that instant the tigresses were consumed in cocoons of green chakra. Pure fear and unadulterated anger flooded the demon's face. No, not again, you will not stop me again. It roared, and from its mouth released a blast of venom green chakra that seemed to strike the cocoons with the force of a hurricane that the demon could only look on with glee at. It's hard to believe this asshole shares the same body as Zenith-sama, Share, said a soft-spoken flirtatious female voice from the cloud of rock and dirt. What do you expect, Taila? He's only a pale copy of the body's real owner, spoke another albeit rougher female voice. The demon's face filled with rage and snarled as the dust cleared, revealing the sources of the two voices. Kakashi could only look in disbelief as what was once two tigers were now two full-grown human women. Both stood at a little over 5'0". The one with the rougher-sounding voice had long black hair tied into a ponytail and dressed in a short battle black kimono with white stockings that reached up to her thigh, over which she wore a pair of thigh-high boots similar in style to the ones Zenith wore, and at her hip was a full-sized katana. The second soft-spoken one had short red hair that reached just below the shoulder and a white Chinese shirt that showed off her midsection, along with a pair of baggy pants and Chinese-style shoes. On her hands she wore fingerless metal-plated gloves, and across her chest was a leather whip tied in such a way that a slight tug from the handle resting at her hip would release the weapon. Let Naruto-kun go and surrender, called the soft-spoken one. Never, but if you want the brat back, then catch. Responded the demon with a gesture that hurled Naruto over the pair and into the sky. Kakashi acted quickly, using the disruption in the demon's concentration to dispel his bonds, and performing a body flicker caught Naruto. I'll secure Naruto, you two deal with him, he yelled to Share and Taila, taking Naruto over to where the former hostages were still blissfully asleep. He quickly set Naruto down and was about to return to the fray when Naruto asked him something. Is it true what you said? Kakashi sighed. He had expected this one day. But he had no idea what to say. He had so much he wanted to tell him. Like I said, Naruto, your father gave his life for the village so that you might be seen as a hero. As his student I will see his wish fulfilled and you survived to an old age. Now stay back, he said, and once again raised his Hite 8, revealing his Sharingan eye. This might get a little rough, as he returned to the fray. Naruto could only watch as the man who had no doubt saved his soul left to return to the battlefield. The little boy was so confused and angry. He wanted nothing more than to go out and join in beating the demon tiger to a pulp and get his Nissan back. But how could he do anything? He wasn't a ninja, he hadn't even gone to the academy yet. Angrily he kicked the dirt, causing a pebble to ping against something that caught Naruto's eye. Brushing away the dirt, he found half buried in ground. No doubt due to the blast from Zenith's last attack was the claw-shaped pendant Zenith wore. Immediately he remembered what the Torateme said, but those thrice damned pendants blessed by Lunanara and her flea-bitten husband and blind brother, we are bound to their subconscious. Without them we would have control of these bodies at the first hint of high emotion. In that instant Naruto flashed a foxy grin that one day would become his trademark. Kona, his future #1 most hyper-active knuckle-headed ninja, had a plan. Demonic jutsu. Sakebamasu no Tora. Roar of the tiger, cried the Tora no Kase as he let loose another chakra scream at his attackers. The two familiars quickly dodged, avoiding the attack. If that's all you have, then let's see how you like this Chanbar jutsu. Odori no Tora. Sword brandishing art. Dance of the tiger, she cried out as she unsheathed her katana, laying out a sequence of complex strikes forming an almost octagonal pattern, and finished it with a chakra-empowered strike along the demon's abdominal muscle, leaving a great gash in its side. The Tora no Kase growled angrily at the wound. But no sooner did he go to clutch it that he felt a whip coil around his wrist. My, does this look familiar? Taunted Share as she kept her whip taut to hold the demon. It does, and you should know by now that you never do the same trick twice. It cried as it twisted its wrist to grab hold of the whip and yank Share over and catch her with a clothesline to the gut. He looked over the dazed familiar mockingly before spinning quickly, catching Kakashi's wrist, a charged Chidori in hand, millimeters from his chest. He then, with his free hand, he shook his finger at him like a parent would to a misbehaving child before hurling into Taila. The Tora no Kase then looked down at the wound Taila had given him and smirked, seeing that it had already healed, leaving only blood-stained matted fur. I weep for your village, Kakashi, if this is the best they have to offer me. For your impertinence I will let you live just long enough for you to see your village burn and your precious Yondaime's legacy fall, said the beast mockingly. The only one falling is you, Torateme, cried a voice from behind them. The Lord Beast only had a moment before he felt the small weight land on his back and small arms wrap around his neck. The demon roared and flung the child from him like a sack of flour, landing hard near Kakashi and Taila. You stupid meat sack, I offered you everything. I could have given you the world, and yet you side with those who cursed you to save their own skins. You really don't get it, do you? If I sided with you, I'd only prove those who hate me right. And besides, why would side with a weakling whose weakness is a piece of jewelry? Naruto retorted. The Tora no Kase paused for a moment at that statement, then looked down at his chest and saw shining brightly Zenith's pendant. It only had an instant to look horrified when the glowing crystal began to cackle. The demon roared in agony as some unseen force brought it to its knees. No, I won't go back. Not again. It cried, only to be answered by Zenith reasserting his control. Yes, you are bastard, and this time, the demon roared as his body shrunk and the fur receded. Don't. Clawed hands became fingers and fangs receded back into the mouth. Come. Glowing green eyes became golden and tiger-like before turning to a normal blue-gray. Back. And with that a shockwave of the venom-green chakra shot out of him as the demon's roar became a human cry. When the wave dispersed, it revealed a fully human Zenith on his knees, out of breath. Zenith could only look at Naruto and smile before succumbing to blissful unconsciousness. Is he awake yet? No, still out cold. I wouldn't be surprised if he was out for the rest of the day after what he went through. But he'll be alright? These were the sounds a dazed Zenith returned to conscious to. What? Oh right, that bastard tiger got loose. If Zan-sensei ever hears about this, I'll never live it down, he thought drowsily to himself as he slowly returned to consciousness. He's coming around, called one of the voices as Zen began to open his eyes. Dazedly he gazed up at a face that one could only consider to be angelic. I must have done something right in a past life for Kami to send such a beautiful angel to collect me, he said dazedly, still half asleep. The other voices chucked as the red-eyed angel blushed. Wait, angels don't blush, he thought when the realization hit him, and he shot up. Glad to see you up and about, Zenith-sama, said the one female voice. Zenith looked over, doing a slight double take as he registered Tila's human form. Crap, the torrid Teme must have put me through the ringer if you're still human, he said as his sore muscles finally caught up with the rest of him. He began to turn to see who else was here when a yellow blur streaked over and nailed him on the chest, laying him out with a thump. There perched on his chest was an irate-looking Naruto, his eyes streaked with tears. "Ni-san, you jerk," he yelled as he began to pound on his chest. "You almost died and left me. You said you wouldn't leave. You said," yelled Naruto, only to have Zenith catch his wrist, halting his tirade. "Naruto, thank you for bringing me back," he said with a kind smile. Naruto could only pause before he broke down crying and embracing Zenith. "I can't believe it, of all the watchwares I have ever heard of, I get saved by the softy," said a chuckling voice. Zenith looked up and caught sight of a man in his late teens, early 20s. He had dark hair and piercing dark eyes of an Uchiha, but they seemed to hold a fire in them not usually seen in an Uchiha. "Well, if the dishonor of being saved by this softy is too much for you, Uchiha-chan, I could arrange for you to be tied up and sent to Kumo in our stead," retorted Zenith cheekily. The Uchiha looked as if he was about to let out a trite retort before he finally burst out laughing. "You got a set of brass ones there, furball. Few people would dare mock Shunshin no Shisui of the body flicker," he said boldly as he held out his hand. "An Uchiha with a sense of humor will wonder never cease," Zen said, shaking the Uchiha's hand. Before turning to the woman he saw earlier, she was still blushing and still as attractive as she seemed when he was out of it. Zen could only assume that she was Yuhi Kurenai, the genjutsu specialist that was sent with the rescue team. "Forgive my earlier remark, Kurenaiheim. I was out of line and sorts," said Zen formally. "It's alright. Given your condition you probably would have said the same thing to Shisui-san," she said coolly. The two men looked from her to each other and shivered in revulsion at the idea, causing Kurenai to laugh at their expense. Naruto only looked at them confusedly and came to the conclusion that all adults were just weird. "Now that I've embarrassed myself, anyone care to tell me what has happened since my episode and where everyone else is?" asked Zenith. "Kakashi and the other Anbu have taken up watch around our camp. Once Lord Hiashi and his brother were awake, he took Hinata and the other Hyuga boy along with Hizashi to a clearing near camp. Your other familiar Share decided to follow them," said Shisui. Nodded, expecting that since the elder familiar had seemed to taking a shine to the Hyuga heiress. That was until he saw Hinata running back to camp, her eyes filled with tears, and immediately glomped on to Zenith for dear life. "Hinata, you're crying, what is it?" asked the watchword concernedly. "Father took him, Neji ni-san," the Hyuga girl tried to say before she broke down in sobs again. Zenith's face turned serious and turned to Taila and the others. "Stay with her and Naruto. Taila, you two with me?" said Zenith as he struggled to his feet, almost falling only to get caught by Shisui and helped to his feet. "Thanks, just need to get my feet under me. Any time, furball," Shisui answered cheekily as he helped the watchword to his feet. Without another word the trio went off in the direction Hinata had come from, not sure what they would find. Hizashi groaned as he took another blow from the enraged tiger hybrid. He had never faced an opponent like her. She was faster than any ninja he had encountered, Hyuga or otherwise. Her style was as fierce and brutal yet graceful as the animal she truly was, and her eyes held something in them that no human he had ever faced had, an utter lack of mercy. He looked up and watched as she pulled back for a finishing blow. The branch family head braced himself to meet his end, but that was not to be. "Kakato Share!" yelled a voice, and just as she struck, her body froze inches from impact. Hizashi looked as her and saw that she was breathing heavily, as if it took everything she had not to attack him. "Be glad, Hyuga-san, another second and you would be unconscious," said the voice. Hizashi turned and saw the hybrid's master, the one Kakashi called Zenith. "Zenith-sama, if you could," said Share through gritted teeth. Zenith nodded and motioned for Hizashi to move away from her. "Hanasu Share," said Zen, and instantly Share continued her motion and cratered the ground with her fist exactly where Hizashi's head had been. "I was wrong, Hyuga-san. If I had been a second later, you would have been dead," said Zen coolly. "Hyuga got schooled by a fancy summons. Man, I miss all the good stuff," remarked Shisui smugly. "I was good enough to beat you, Uchiha Teme," Hizashi said coldly. "Yeah, like 10 years ago, but I've gotten a lot better since, so if you want another go," said Shisui eagerly. Like I would waste my time on a dobi teme like you, said Hizashi coldly, causing Shisui to seethe in fury. Now listen here, you pale-eyed, overrated piece of she, began the Uchiha, only to be silenced by Zenith clamping his mouth shut. Shisui, as much as I would love to see you beat him up, we don't have time for it, said Zenith calmly. He then turned to his familiar, now Share, could you please tell me just what prompted you to attack them? The familiar stayed resolutely silent and glared daggers at Hizashi. Zenith groaned angrily, fine, you two won't tell me, I'll ask someone who will, he said as he went over to Hiyoshi's unconscious body. Reaching into his satchel, he pulled out a small bottle, and took a very deep breath before uncapping and wafting it under the Lord Hyuga's nose. In an instant he shot up as still as a board, his eyes watering and skin turning slightly green. Well, that's something you don't see every day. A Hyuga about to lose his lunch, remarked Kurenai with a chuckle. Easy, Hyuga-san, just take a deep breath. The nausea is just a side effect of the Iki no Akare. Evil spirit's breath. It will pass. Just keep taking deep breaths, said Zenith calmly. After a moment Hiyoshi regained his composure and stood up, his face stony and emotionless but his eyes and brow betraying confusion. Hizashi, what is going on? One minute I'm putting Neji to sleep and the next moment I'm being woken up by that foul-smelling salt, he asked, betraying a slight sign of anger. That was partially my fault, Hyuga-san. My familiar Share took it upon herself to attack you, and for that I apologize. However, I also know that neither of my familiars would attack someone without reason, so I must ask what was going on, asked Zen in a serious but polite tone. A family matter, a private family matter, said Hiyoshi curtly. One that must be dealt with, so if my brother and could have some privacy. A private family matter, is that what they call child abuse nowadays? Said Share-in with utter disdain. That is a very volatile claim to make, Share-san. What proof do you have? Asked Kurenai curtly. Share gave Hiyoshi a vicious smile like a cat that had just caught a canary before answering. After Hiyoshi and his brother were revived, they had a discussion on the edge of camp. I was tending to Hinata, so I didn't bother listening, putting the cub before the intricacies of those who are supposed to care for her. Next thing I know, Hiyoshi-sama comes to collect Hinata, stating that he needs her for something. With her state as fragile as it was at the moment, due to her capture, I asked to go with in case she needed some comfort. Hiyoshi-sama refused, then took Hinata to this clearing, followed by Neji and his father. I had a bad feeling, so I waited a moment before following through the trees. When I got here I heard Hinata yell, saying, "You can't do it, it's not right. It's for his own good that the seal be restored." Just after that she ran off. That was when I knocked out Hiyoshi and attacked Neji's father. I intended to keep them occupied until you came. I did become a little overzealous on that part. Zenith closed his eyes and groaned. He then looked over at the two elder men incredulously. He had a look on his face like the sea just before a freak storm hits, calm and placid yet likely to rise up and sweep you away. For his own good to restore the seal. Just what good is that, Hyuga? Afraid that you'll have an uprising from the branch house families once they know that the all-so-feared Hyuga clan curse seal is breakable. Afraid that once they no longer bow to you that you might have to answer some rather embarrassing questions? Just what good was there to do this to a child again? Zenith demanded with a tiger-like growl no permeating his voice. The only good worth anything, a father trying to save his son's life, answered Hizashi resolutely. Oh, and just how does subjecting a child to that seal save his life? Asked Shisui incredulously. Hizashi looked to his brother, giving the group a look over the Hyuga lord's side. Tell them if you wish, I do not have the strength to relive our family's shame and perform the ritual. Okay, can someone just tell us what is going on? Demanded Kurenai. What shame are you talking about? It was just after I received my seal. Our father was good man and hated seeing one of his sons purposely held back for no other reason than being born second. One night he slipped out of the village to seek out a legendary seal master, Kentaro Yoshi. I believe the Watchword knows that name, said Hizashi looking at Zenith, who seemed shocked. My grandfather, your father, was the Hyuga that contracted him to reverse the seal? Yes, answered Hizashi. When the elders found out they were furious. My father was the acknowledged family head and could not be touched without calling the attention of the Hokage. So they threatened him, saying that unless he ceased and desisted his actions, one of his sons would lose his life. Reluctantly he agreed, severing contact with Master Kentaro, and to ensure no one would get the idea again, a law was passed stating that any Hyuga branch family member found without a seal is to be killed on sight. Are you kidding? Sarutobi-sama may be an old man, but he would never authorize the killing of someone just because they didn't hold to their family's retarded rules, said Shisui defensively. And he never did, but the elders set the standing order to every branch family member to carry it out, and under the clan non-interference law he can't stop the elders from doing so. Thankfully the order has never been needed, but I have no doubt that should my son return to the village that the elders will order his death unless the seal is restored, Hizashi stated sadly. Zenith groaned and massaged his head. I wish you two had just told me that. I would have saved you the effort, he said exhaustedly. Just what do you mean by that? Inquired Hiyashi. The sealing arts are some of the hardest and most powerful of all the shinobi arts, but it has a major weakness: time. Every technique, no matter how powerful or skilled the caster, has a brief window where the seal can be broken or restored without harm to the recipient. Depending on the seal and the caster's skill, the window widens and narrows but is still there, stated Zen. The brothers looked to each other in shock at what the watcher was saying. I will restore the seal without having to put that boy through the pain of the sealing process again. In return, you both will explain to him why his freedom was taken away and why he has to suffer. Do we understand each other? Both of them nodded resolutely. Then we have an accord, if you will stand aside, said Zen as he moved over to where Neji was laying. He silently pierced his thumb and smeared a line of blood over the boy's forehead. Then kneeling he formed a tiger seal and began to chant. By blood it is done. By blood be undone. Let what was be once more. By blood it is done. By blood be undone. Let what is exist no more. He repeated the verse several times, and slowly the smeared blood began to glow, and on the 7th time through the light shattered, leaving a perfect seal on Neji's brow. It is done, said Zenith before collapsing from chakra exhaust. Easy furball, can't have you getting hurt after being all heroic, said Shisui sarcastically as he and Kurenai rushed over to help him up. I'll be fine, just need to rest, he said as the pair helped him to his feet. He then looked over at Share, who had not moved at all, to help her master. You disapprove of my actions? He asked. Share said nothing, only turning to head back to camp. That doesn't look good, remarked Shisui. It'll be fine, he said. He then looked over at the two brothers now tending to Neji. We had best head back to camp. I'm sure the other are worried. With that the group headed back. Zenith awoke the following morning exhausted. He figured that he was at 75% of full strength. It would have been more, but restoring a Class 3 seal had taken its toll and he had to reap the effects. He gave a light yawn and sat up, stretching his arms. After what you have been through, most people wouldn't be able to move the next day, remarked a voice. Zenith looked up and saw the weasel-masked Anbu that had been rescued standing above him. Well, I'm not most people, like you. I am more than I appear, Uchiha Itachi, remarked Zenith smugly. The Anbu chuckled. What gave me away? Without resorting to my dojutsu, there are only 2-leaf Anbu who were admitted so young. As I have already met the copycat, that means you must be the Uchiha clan genius. That and the Kumo nins removed your mask while you were captured, responded Zenith. I'll have to remember to cast a stronger jutsu over my mask next time, remarked Itachi as he leapt to the ground below. So, anything interesting happened while I was asleep? Asked Zenith as he began to pull out a few pieces of jerky from his pack. Not much. Your other summons Taila threatened Hiyashi-sama with bodily harm after you returned. The heiress stayed mostly with Share or Kurenai-san, and young Naruto-san called him an emotionless bastard with a stick up his butt the size of an oak, remarked Itachi in bored tone. Zenith sighed. Yeah, that sounds like Naruto, he chuckled. And speaking of the knucklehead, here he comes, said Zenith, pointing out the blonde who was darting about looking terrified before running up to Zenith. Ni-san, they're gone. Sharar-chan and Taila-chan have disappeared. Calm down, Naruto, they probably just got up to hunt and didn't want to disturb you, said Zenith, trying to calm the anxious blonde, just as a torrent of water rained down from overhead. Exasperatedly, Zenith looked up and saw 2 black and white kittens looking down on the pair, both holding half a water containment scroll in their mouths and smiling cheekily. This is for yesterday, isn't it? Asked Zenith rhetorically. The pair just smirked and ran off. Well, that was unexpected, deadpanned Itachi as the pair shook the excess water off themselves. Who the hell were those two? demanded Naruto as he made a scene of gouging the water out of his ear. Sharar and Taila in their chibi form, Zenith answered with a tired sigh. What? Cried Naruto as his small mind tried to process that the two prankster kittens he had seen were the same as kind and caring Sharar and Taila. It's a side effect of the inner warrior technique. The chakra surge used in its performance greatly drains the user. As a result, the user reverts to a younger form in order to heal and regain chakra, Zenith explained. So until their chakra is restored, started Itachi, only to be interrupted by a loud yell. Come back here with my book, you stupid cats. Zenith, Naruto, and Itachi could only watch as the pair raced by, one of them carrying a certain orange book in their mouth, followed by a very angry Kakashi. We have to deal with two prank-pulling kleptomaniac kittens, finished Zenith with an exasperated sigh as he raced off to save his two wayward familiars from being killed by a porn-deprived ninja. Zenith-sama, big meanie, yelled Chibi Sharar about half an hour later as he brought the two wayward kittens back to camp tied securely with ninja wire. Yeah, big meanie baka, parroted Chibi Taila as the pair struggled to get loose. It's only until you two are back to normal, said Zenith firmly. Zenith quickly handed the kittens to Naruto and a now awake Hinata for safe keeping while he joined the rest of the adults in breaking camp. If we go all day, we should be inside of the village by late tonight, said Kurenai as she doused the fire. Only if we go by foot. After all that has happened, I plan on getting us to Konoha as quickly as possible. With luck, we'll be there by the afternoon or sundown at the latest, said Zenith as he secured the few perishables that had been gathered in a transport scroll. Oh, and how do you plan to pull that one off, furball? Fly us home perhaps? Asked Shisui sarcastically as he returned from refilling the canteens. Something like that, said Zenith with a slick smile as he walked off to check and see if anything was missing. Kurenai and Shisui could only look at each other confusedly. Whatever Zenith meant by that could only mean something interesting. It was mid-afternoon when the Chunin guard noticed something approaching the gate. From a distance it looked like a large dust cloud. That was until the huge chakra signature that accompanied it hit them. The guards quickly sent runners to the Hokage's tower for orders. The gate reinforcements arrived just in time to see a large tiger leapt the gate and land gracefully in the street. The ninjas called and gaped in shock at the size of the beast. It was at least 8 feet tall from ground to shoulder and had what looked like a huge saddle strapped to its back that looked like it could fit about a dozen people. The tiger, ignoring the shocked humans, lay down as if it was to take a nap as someone on the saddle threw a rope ladder down the side, allowing the tiger's passengers to disembark. There was even further surprise as the Anbu Black Ops ninjas Tiger and Weasel were the first to disembark, followed by the blonde head of Uzumaki Naruto. Next was Hyuga Hizashi and Lord Hiashi, followed by Yuhi Kurenai and Hyuga Hinata, who was carrying two struggling kittens in her arms. They were followed by Uchiha Shisui and finally a man in a blue tunic and black pants who had mid-sized travel with him. Once he was off, he patted the tiger on his flank and said, "Thanks for the lift, Zaeor." "My pleasure as always, Zenith-sama. As always I am at your disposal," the tiger said with a bow before vanishing with a puff of smoke. The tiger Anbu simply turned to a nearby ninja. "Clear the crowd." Anbu Tiger and Weasel returning. "Mission. Kidnap retrieval success," he said quietly. The ninja quickly cleared a path as the group made their way to the tower to inform the Hokage what had happened and what was to come.
That's all for now. If you want to see next part, then please like this video and subscribe my channel. Thank you.